voicing the salad. I don't want a salad. Salad is a sandwich this big. Get it right, it's a 6-inch sandwich. I want a foot-long sandwich without a bowl.
I work the night shift at Subway, and for the most part, I prefer the much later shifts as there are far fewer customers at that time of night. The only major downside to the night shift is dealing with the crazies that come in from time to time. However, there's been one guy recently. He's been coming in just about every night, and out of all the people of the night I've encountered at this job, he's the one that scares me. He's super tall, with a mean overbite, and I can't exaggerate just how extreme those features are. When I say he's tall, I mean he's probably several inches over 7 feet tall, well and far above the top of the measuring stick taped to the door that's meant to identify would-be robbers. And his overbite, it's downright freakish. It makes him look like some sort of man-crocodile hybrid, the way his gnarly, rotten snaggle teeth jut out of his jaw, which he can't even fully get his lips over with how deformed it is. Because of this, his mouth is always hanging open, and his mouth breathing makes it even more obvious that his oral hygiene is non-existent. Even stranger, his clothes are too small to fit a guy as big as him, which makes me think he's either homeless or just too poor to be able to buy clothes in his size. But what really stinks the place up every time he comes in are his feet, which he never has shoes or socks on to cover up. Given that he looks so desperate and downtrodden, I thought at first he wouldn't be a very picky customer, but I was dead wrong about that. He always wanted his subs made to ridiculously exact proportions, like he was ordering catering to his wedding or something. And if I ever made a mistake, I wouldn't even have to give him a breath of attitude for him to flip out like a little baby, except his tantrums were anything but little.
Add lettuce now.
Okay, sir?
No, not enough, more!
Okay, sir.
No! Too much! Take it off!
That's how it went every time I made his sub. We were stuck in this dance of irritating exactness, where I would put on a tiny bit of a topping, or take off a tiny bit of a topping, and he would scream at me and threaten to rip my head off until I get it right. Obviously, making an entire foot-long sub like this takes an unreasonable amount of time, so even though it was the middle of the night, a line of tired, impatient people often formed behind him. Man, can't you just make it yourself if you're gonna be like this? Okay, sir, here's your one custom foot-long, and that'll be $6.95. He dug through his pockets for several anxious seconds, obviously struggling to fit his huge hands in normal-sized pockets. Finally, he fished out a crumpled $5 bill and threw it on the counter, then picked the sub off the counter with his unnaturally long arms. But before walking away to eat, he looked me in the eye and flashed me a haunting grin and said,
$5 footlong!
Footlongs haven't actually been $5 for years, long since before I ever started working at Subway. But I wasn't about to pester this guy for $1.95. Plus, from the way he spoke, and just everything about the way he was, I figured he had some sort of mental disorder or disability, which meant I'd probably be talking to a brick wall if I even tried to get him to pay full price. So I just made up the difference of the change in the tip jar and called it sorted. But I must say, one of the weirdest things about him is the way he eats. He doesn't even chew. He just unwraps the sandwich and devours the whole thing in one bite. That first night, things were mostly uneventful. But that was only the first of many trips he made to the shop. After that, I saw him just about every shift, and I wasn't the only person there who recognized him. People hated getting stuck in line behind him because they knew he would take a stupid amount of time to get through. However, there was one customer in particular who had a special bone to pick. He was the guy in line that first night, just an average-looking black dude with a regular night shift break time. That guy was always snarky.
Why don't you just make the sub yourself since you're so damn tall? Emotional damage! Leave me the hell alone!
I know this is a really weird situation, but I got used to it. I got used to his pickiness, and I even started to get better at knowing what he wanted. I got used to him sitting in the same exact spot every night to eat his sandwich in one unholy bite. I got used to taking a couple dollars out of my tips when he handed me a $5 bill. And I even got used to the way he scared me without even doing anything. He was obviously one of those people that needed a strict routine in order to function, so I wasn't going to mess with it, even if he underpaid for every order. But that's why I was struck with curiosity when his order suddenly changed. One night, he came in at the same time and ordered the same bread. There I was thinking this would just be like any other night, but then he didn't order any meatballs like he always did, just the cheese, veggies, and condiments. This helped bring the price of the footlong down $1 or so, but as always, he paid with a crumpled $5. I really didn't think he was trying to be economic, so I watched him as he sat down. I was only able to do this because it was slower than usual that night, and I had no other customers to attend to. I tried not to make it obvious, but I was mesmerized. He unwrapped the footlong and opened it up, then reached into his jacket and pulled out some kind of weird meat. I figured it was roadkill or jerky or something, but whatever it was, he laid it out very carefully on the sandwich, all the while muttering,
"Me make it myself this time."
And when he was done, he closed up the sub and swallowed it whole, just like every other footlong. This went on for several weeks, and each night, my curiosity grew. For some reason, business at the night shift had slowed down more than ever before, so I had very little to do but ponder what that mysterious meat was. At the beginning of my next shift, I planted a tiny little hidden camera inside the napkin holder on the table he always sat at. And after going through the motions one more time and closing up shop, I retrieved it and went home to look over the footage. All I wanted was a closer look at the meat he was eating, but I ended up getting more than I bargained for. I watched him pull out meat from inside his jacket, but as he did, a dark bloody finger fell out and hit the table. He saw this and quickly placed it in the sandwich before I could see it in the moment. But I'd seen it all right, and my mind was sent reeling. It didn't take me long to put two and two together, to realize that the crocodile giant had gotten fed up with a certain man's issues with his ways. Instead of settling for Subway's meatballs, he'd killed that man and had been eating him slowly for nights on end. No wonder business had been slow. First and foremost, we want to apologize to any Chick-fil-A fans in advance. This is hands down one of the most disturbing fast food stories we have ever covered on the channel. More details will be explained during and after the story. Chick-fil-A is supposed to be pretty popular. It's supposed to be so good that the drive-thru lines can wrap around the building and pour out into the street at any time of day or night. I remember being one of those people in line. The faithful hungry customer waiting to get the most delicious chicken sandwich money can buy from a fast food joint. For years, I was used to the steady quality. And more than that, I was used to sharing the experience with friends and family. But then I moved cities to be close to my first job after college. Right after I moved in, I didn't have many friends aside from my coworkers, and their go-to lunch spot was always Popeyes. I went along with it because I didn't want to be left out, but to be honest, I really dislike Popeyes. There's just something extra greasy about it that makes it sit like a rock inside my stomach. After a few occasions of grabbing a disappointing lunch with my coworkers, I was really homesick for some Chick-fil-A, whether anyone would go with me or not. Of course, I wasn't going to drive all the way back to my old city just to have a chicken sandwich, so I took a chance on the location near my new home. I arrived after work around 6 p.m., which is usually a pretty busy time for them, but I was the only one there. As I drove up, I saw no cars in the drive-thru and only one car left in the parking lot. I'd never seen a Chick-fil-A so deserted during the day, so out of curiosity I went inside. At first glance, nothing seemed too out of the ordinary, except for the fact that every single seat was empty and there was nobody waiting in line. I walked straight up to the register, but even there, I saw nobody. I could hear all the machinery running back there in the kitchen, but I didn't see one single person manning them. For a moment, I wondered if there was anybody working back there at all.
Hello?
My voice echoed without a response. I was just about to turn away and leave when an extremely elderly man hobbled out to greet me.
Well, hello there, little lady. What's your name?
Yeah, could I just have a number 1 combo with a large drink and a small fry?
Would you like that cooked here or at home?
Excuse me, what do you mean by at home?
Well, it's just a shame to see such a beautiful woman going out to dinner by herself. I could be your chef and chaperone if you allow me to take you home. The ladies tell me I make a mean chicken sandwich. You know, you can eat it while we're in bed.
Oh, that's very sweet of you, but no.
You sure? I can make it extra juicy just for you.
I said no, thank you. I have a boyfriend.
Well, if you have a man, then where the hell is he?
That's none of your business. Just take my order, please.
All right, then, fine. I see how it is. What was it? Number 1 with a large drink and a small fry?
Yes, thank you.
All right, then. I'll be back. Gotta make it myself. Don't go anywhere.
I couldn't believe my ears. I never had such bad service at a Chick-fil-A before. I was starting to see why nobody in this town ever wanted to eat here. And by the looks of it, if that guy was the manager, nobody wanted to work here either. It was obvious now why it was so empty inside. If it wasn't so eerie, I wouldn't have believed my eyes when I saw a glimpse of a little mouse running around the corner. I couldn't believe a place like this wasn't already out of business. Even more so because the service was about as quick as it was respectful. I got bored quickly while waiting, and at some point, I got up to use the bathroom. More just to kill time than for actually needing to urinate. But when I got into the bathroom, I just about ran out then and there. And God, I should have. It was filthier than any public restroom I've ever seen. Even those rundown gas station bathrooms that people do all sorts of stuff inside of. The toilet seat was crusted over with something, but at least there was enough toilet paper to cover it up so I could sit. But that wasn't even the worst part. I was in the middle of my urination when I felt something bite my ankle. I reflexively kicked my leg out, just to see a jumbo-sized rat fly up and hit the stall door, fall down and smack against the floor, then scurry away like he'd been the victim. I immediately clinched up and pulled my pants back on and rushed out of that horrible stall. I went to wash my hands, but there was not a drop of soap in the dispenser. Worse still, when I looked down into the sink, I saw an army of cockroaches crawling out of the drain. At that point, I knew there was no point in trying to rinse off my hands. Every second I spent in that cesspit was just making me dirty. I stormed out of the bathroom ready to tear that old creep a new one, but he was somehow ahead of me. At the moment he saw me, he climbed on top of the counter and started screaming with my food in hand, dangling it out toward my face.
Here's your food, sweetheart. Come and grab it like I'm your boyfriend.
I marched up and snatched the food out of his hands before he could get the bright idea to start throwing it around like a crazy person.
Shut up, sicko. What the hell is wrong with you?
I made no indication that I wanted to continue speaking with him. I had my food and all I wanted to do was eat it, so maybe I could still get the little taste of home and make the best of this awful situation. I picked out a table in the far corner of the restaurant. At first glance, everything seemed to be in order. I had my drink, my sandwich, and my fries. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for me to notice that something was terribly wrong. And I'm not talking about flat soda or soggy fries. As I took my first bite of the sandwich, I noticed an unusual, unsettling chewy texture. It sent a chill down my spine, like when you find an unexpected tendon in a bite of meat. I spat it out immediately. I looked first at the half-chewed pile and saw a dark spot that shouldn't have been there. My first thought was that something had burned. I threw the sandwich down on the table and pulled it apart. The top bun was fine, and so was the fillet. For a second I thought I was tricking myself, but then I saw on the bottom side of the bottom bun that dark crescent shape. I picked at it thinking it was char, but it didn't flake away. I took a closer look and saw what looked like the shape of a tail and tiny little whiskers poking out of the bread. Still in disbelief, I pinched it and carefully pulled the object out of the bun. There, I held it up in my hand, and my jaw dropped. It was a baby rat with a tiny bite taken out of it. My stomach convulsed and I started dry heaving. At the same time, I couldn't stop myself from screaming. Somehow I had the wherewithal in that moment to snap a picture of the situation. But I didn't stay sane for very long. Knowing what I bit into and almost swallowed thoroughly broke my mind. I could hardly eat for weeks following the incident. I kept waking up from nightmares of baby rats spawning in my stomach and crawling out of my throat. Things have gotten better now, but I still haven't fully recovered from the PTSD. Of course, I'm suing everyone involved with the situation for everything they had, and I won't rest until that place is bulldozed and that crazy old creep gets thrown in the nursing home for the criminally insane that he belongs in. On November 25th, 2016, a Pennsylvania woman claimed that she found a small mouse which was baked into her Chick-fil-A sandwich. This is the alleged photograph of the sandwich in question. You can clearly see a mouse infused in the bun. Here's another image of the mouse separated. The woman was treated at a nearby hospital for extreme nausea and has since filed a lawsuit.
The last picture? I see it right there. And you're lying. So delete it right now before I make a scene. I swear to God. Delete it right now before I make a scene. I want to see it. Yeah, let me see it. No, delete it right now. That's very disrespectful. How dare you? How dare you?
This has got to be one of the most intense clips on the net. A gym creep caught red-handed and put on blast to the general public. What came of this situation was nothing short of disturbing, as this was the kind of thing most females have to deal with during their workout. The female in question records the confrontation with the creep on her cell phone. Here's a dramatized version animated by yours truly. I worked out frequently at my local gym called Planet Fitness. I'd like to call myself a seasoned gym rat, as I had a habit of working out till I experienced hot flashes where I would see nothing but white for a split second. The gym was known for containing mostly females since it didn't have the same heavy-set equipment that another fitness center had, like LA Fitness. Though there were the occasional men that attended, which wasn't really a bad thing if they weren't looking at me during my workouts so damn often. One day, while I was doing my routine at the gym, I saw this man doing some warm-ups, his eyes fixated on me.
Ugh, how typical.
I thought to myself. I had encountered a lot of men before who used to flex their muscles at an angle where I could see them, or converse with me, hoping they could get my number in the end. So I assumed this guy was just one of them, and I went on to do a series of drop setting, which required me to lift and drop weights about 20 times. Moments later, I could see from my peripheral vision that the man was no longer stretching, but staring dead at me. I was used to guys glancing at me every now and then, but there was something about this man's gaze that made me feel uneasy. So I decided to transfer to the other side, where I could no longer see him. However, when I transferred, it didn't take long for him to find me and continue oogling. When I turned my gaze towards him, he smiled and began waving his hand, revealing crusty yellow teeth. Thinking that he might come close if I waved back, I simply averted my gaze and approached an instructor, pretending to inquire about the sessions he offered. However, this man was adamant. He stood as he watched me converse with the fitness trainer, and when the coach noticed him, he, too, was creeped out, prompting him to step forward. Then, facing the creep, he asked, "Is there something you need, buddy?" His face began to sour, and after gritting his teeth in frustration, he shouted at the instructor, "You're interrupting my workout, Mr. Steroids! Can't you see I'm trying to work out? How about you leave the young lady alone so we can all enjoy ourselves?" I couldn't help but feel disgusted at his "leave the young lady alone so we can all enjoy ourselves" remark. Nonetheless, I immediately left and decided to transfer to another Planet Fitness location the following day. When I finally arrived at the new gym, it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I'm not talking about dumbbells. I began to immediately lift weights freely without having to worry if some creep was eyeballing me. I felt like I was finally able to push myself to my max and began experiencing hot flashes that I attributed as my body telling me to take it easy. However, to my horror, I saw the same guy from a distance, staring right at me. I couldn't believe my eyes as I was literally convinced I had a psychotic stalker on my hands. Disgusted, I transferred to the other side of the gym, and somehow it was just like yesterday. However, this time there were no fitness trainer, and there were a lot more women than men doing sit-ups and yoga. He did follow me as I anticipated, and he angled himself so that I was still in his line of sight. Then, moments later, when I gave my protein shake a jiggle, I saw the creep oogling me once more as he curled his fingers around those dumbbells. And even when I wasn't supposed to look, I couldn't help but notice all the mess he created from drooling and wetting his shorts. Even the women next to him moved to another area, apparently frightened. Bothered by this, I transferred once more. Luckily, this gym was much more spacious than the last one. However, moments later, as I was filling up my water bottle, I was startled at the sight of a man crouching next to the fountain, licking it passionately like he was a dehydrated dog, with his eyes in contact with mine.
Stop licking your lips at me, you freak!
I jolted in fear and threw the bottle at the creep, fleeing the area. Then, as I approached the elliptical machine, I noticed the man still following behind me, pissing me off. Moments later, while doing some squats, he came to the bench, and I could feel him pressing behind me. So I moved to another squat rack, where the freak followed me, pressing behind me once more. There was no way in hell I wanted to work my glutes and give this creep a front row seat.
What's your deal, huh?
I asked, infuriated, but instead of saying something in return, he chortled in a condescending way that pushed me to my limit.
Alright, that's it. I'm calling the cops on this one.
He grabbed my arm tightly and whispered, "Come on, don't ruin the fun. Just play along."
Let go of me!
I scowled as I yanked my arm away from him. Okay, you win. No cops. I promise I'll leave. He turned his back and went in another direction. When the coast was clear, I went back to squatting, my mind finally at ease. However, just when I thought everything was smooth sailing from here, I saw a bright flash of light from the corner of my eyes, and a creep was there with a cell phone in his hands. When he noticed me glaring at him, he pretended to be talking to someone on the phone, and I completely lost it this time. I yelled amidst everyone in the gym, letting them know that there was a creep in our presence.
Were you just taking a photo of my butt, you creep?
The man's confidence diminished as the other women in the gym glanced at him with abhorrence.
Hey, answer me when I'm talking to you.
In an attempt to save face, he replied, "What are you talking about? Don't be full of yourself, woman. I was talking to someone on the phone."
Don't you dare lie to me, you pervert. I saw that camera flash on your phone.
I grabbed his phone and started browsing through his gallery, which contained candid photos of different women working out in the gym. Then, among the latest images were pictures of myself, squatting.
Delete these photos right now. Do you understand me? Right now.
I exclaimed as I pushed him frantically. Okay, I'm doing it. Sheesh, so sensitive.
Show me you've deleted all of them. Show me.
He displayed an empty gallery, cussing me for being a killjoy, and finally left the gym. I cried as some of the other women approached me to offer some comfort. But what really bothers me was how my hot flashes were probably just flashes from that creep's cell phone the whole time. And I can bench press 5 plates, but...
The next story is a nightmare fuel animation based on the classic Mario and Luigi mascots. They've been around for approximately over 3 decades now, and we'd figured we'd make a backstory on the polarizing figures for the Nintendo fans out there. Here's what the story looks like. Have you ever heard of the legendary tale of the Super Mario Bros? The iconic plumbers with their signature red and green attire that every kid marvels at when playing Nintendo? I'm not sure myself if this is indeed fact or fiction, but from my own judgment, I can't rule out its legitimacy. I heard this story decades ago, and it was told from a friend of mine. We'll call the individual involved Rick for anonymous purposes. Rick was in his late teens, around the age of hitting full puberty, morphing from boy to man. He was 18 years old to be exact, but was still a kid at heart, because he would occasionally do sleepovers at his friends' places. Near the tail end of his high school days, he befriended this guy named Luigi. It was rumored that Luigi had an older brother named Mario, and no one really knew the likes of him, as he was considered a closed-off weirdo who isolated himself often. Rick never really knew Mario, despite being close friends with Luigi. It was said through word of mouth that Luigi and Mario were both high school dropouts who fished to be plumbers early on since school wasn't their strong suit. The brothers would eventually move in together at a 2-story house, occupied with Luigi taking top floor and Mario taking bottom. Whenever Rick kicked it at Luigi's place, there was never any talk or acknowledgement of Mario. Until one night, on one Friday evening, the pair decided to order an extra-large pizza to go along with their movie later that night. While Luigi sorted through his box of VHS tapes, Rick was in charge of purchasing the pizza.
Hello, this is Pizza Hut. How may I take your order?
Yeah, give me an extra-large with every topping on the menu, man. Oh, except pineapple.
Alright, is there anything else I can help you with, sir?
And maybe just be generous with the toppings, especially the mushrooms. Thank you, dude. A few minutes later, Rick and Luigi settle on the living room couch while awaiting their pizza. Rick curiously asks Luigi, "Hey dude, how come your brother never leaves the basement? Like, does he ever go out?"
I thought I told you not to mention his name.
Sorry dude, I couldn't help but ask. Did you want to invite him up here to join?
Stop asking about him. What's the matter with you?
The doorbell rings and that's when the pizza guy arrives. Rick heads over to the foyer and pays the delivery man with a few dollar bills. The time was approximately 11 p.m. when the pair began to indulge in the extra-large mountain of cheesy goodness topped by the finest toppings. But from that point on, things took a sadistic turn for the worst. Luigi began to go on a verbal rampage as he spotted something extremely wrong with the pizza, saying,
Why the hell did you order mushrooms on the pizza? He can smell it from down there.
"What the hell are you talking about, dude?
Don't eat it. I'm warning you. He'll kill us all.
Are you talking about your brother, Mario?"
We have to take all the mushrooms off the pizza, now, before it's too late.
Okay. The pair began to frantically pluck every last bit of mushrooms off the pizza to set aside. It was known that no one, not even Luigi, had seen his own brother in over a year, despite living under the same roof. They apparently had a falling out over a similar situation where a past guest ordered pizza with mushrooms. Despite all that, Luigi made his way down the dark and creaky basement with his flashlight. The room was filled with complete darkness, with not even a light switch in sight.
Mario, where are you?
It's me, Mario.
Where are you? It smells like shit down here. And why the hell is there a damn well in the middle of the basement?
Luigi then flashes his light in the corner of the room and notices Mario standing face first against the wall while murmuring some kind of gibberish to himself.
I need to expand. I need to grow bigger. I need mushrooms.
Luigi then crouches with the bowl in his hand and sets it on the ground while nervously saying,
Long time no see, bro. I'm leaving the mushrooms here, okay, Mario?
It's me, Mario!
Without any hesitation, Luigi makes a run for it up the stairs and resumes his sleepover with Rick. The pair began to watch a movie while devouring their slices of pizza. Rick could tell Luigi was a little shaken up, but decided not to address the matter. Instead, he stuffed his face even further. A quarter way through the movie, Rick asks Luigi,
Hey dude, can I have the last slice? Sure, dude.
Wait, don't eat that!
Luigi catches himself mid-sentence as he spots a mushroom on the pizza slice, but his warning was unfortunately late by a millisecond.
It's me, Mario! No! No!
The next animation is loosely based on a case in Wisconsin that happened around the 4th of July of 2021. What went down was pretty tragic, but nonetheless a shocking tale to be shared to the world. It's been a day since my parents left the house to visit our family's cabin in White Lake, Wisconsin for the 4th of July. The last time I ever saw them and spoke to them was before they left in their Honda Civic. Since then, I haven't been able to hear from them, which I thought was quite strange. This wasn't the first time they'd been to the cabin, so based on past experiences, they'd contact me within 2 to 3 hours. However, this time around, I hadn't received a call from them or a single text telling me how they were doing. So, as 24 hours passed, I began to sweat profusely, feeling a bit anxious. Hey, stop being so paranoid, I told myself, as I sat on the couch watching my favorite rom-com on HBO. Then, moments later, my heart skipped a beat, and my entire body went cold within seconds, even if it was in the middle of summer. Turning off the television, thoughts of my parents getting into an accident or being robbed by hitchhikers consumed me. No matter what I did, I couldn't shake off the feeling of despair. On the second day, I tried calling them again, but still no response. So my hands would constantly fidget as I dialed the numbers. Calm down, Alvin, I thought to myself. You're imagining things again, and sometimes you go way out of line. Later on, I contacted my relatives to see if they could shed some light. However, to my dismay, they had not received any message from my parents for the last couple of hours. Lost in agony, I sat alone at the dining table, heedless of the bowl of tomato soup left untouched as I gazed blankly into the void. I began talking to myself, saying, "Thanks for the soup, Mom. Your cooking's the best in the world." And as I poured myself a glass of water, I added, "Do you want a bottle of beer, Dad? I can get one from the fridge." The water overspilled, blanketing the floor. Then, what started as anxiety slowly turned to rage as I glanced at the empty chairs. I couldn't go to work, my thoughts overthrown by the nagging feeling that something terrible had already happened. So, while I was taking a shower, I would stay in the tub for hours, allowing the water to flow constantly as I stared at the ceiling, wondering, what happened to those two? Did they reach the cabin? Where the hell are they? Then, as I went to bed, I would hear screams in the middle of the night, keeping me up until the wee hours of the morning. It sounded much like my parents, but as soon as I turned on the lights, no one was there. So, like a nightmare that I had to wash away, I would lock myself in the bathroom, splashing water on my face. Then, glancing at myself in the mirror, I would draw a deranged smile, telling myself, "This is nothing. Why am I being so foolish? They're probably having so much fun that they forgot to check their phones. That's all." Moments later, those rosy cheeks were bathed in salty tears as I maintained a forceful grin, but nothing worked. All this psychobabble wasn't getting me anywhere. Frustrated, I slammed the door, pulling out the drawers in my room and ripping the pillows apart, countless wing feathers scattering across the floor. So finally, on the third night, I decided to call 911. Come on, pick up. What's the matter with you? I don't have all day. Every second felt like an hour. So when an officer answered the call, I had never felt more relieved.
Thanks for calling 911. How may I help you?
The lady on the other end asked, with authority and reverence. I'm Alvin, and, you see, my parents have been missing, so, for some odd reason, I couldn't get my head straight.
Okay, sir. Take a deep breath and calm down. Kindly give me your location, please.
I gave her my address and demanded that they step on it. And when she confirmed if it was both parents, I yelled, "Yes!"
All right. Understood. Now, I need you to calm down as we dispatch police officers who will soon be headed your way. Am I clear?
Stop telling me to calm down, for goodness sake! I fiercely replied, my hand shaking.
I understand, sir, but I need you to promise me that you won't cause yourself any harm until the cops arrive. Can you do that for me?
Yeah, whatever. Just hurry up, will ya?
Alright, thank you, Alvin. The police should be with you shortly.
When the cops rang the doorbell, I instantly ran to the door and urged them to come in. Then, sitting on the couch, they asked me too many questions that made me feel like it wasn't getting us anywhere. Look, why don't you just go to the cabin like I told you, so we wouldn't be wasting any more time? Don't worry, sir, we're getting to that. We just need to gather all the necessary details before instructing our co-officers to search the cabin. But I already told you everything you need to know, so get on with it! Moments later, the cops went outside, contacting authorities on their radios. Then, with a look of bewilderment, they glanced at me, put down their radios, and headed back inside the house. So what did they say, officers? As of now, there's no sign of entry in the cabin, and the car you described was nowhere in sight. What? That can't be! They should have been there since the 4th of July! That's what they told me! I understand, sir. Our detectives are still at the cabin doing everything they can, so in the meantime, we'll have to search your house for any clues. Standard protocol. At that moment, I was both perplexed and furious, convinced that they could be making more progress if they went back to their car, tracing them. So I pulled one of them by the collar and said, "No! What's wrong with you? Instead of wasting your time here, you should be out on the road searching for the evidence!" Both officers looked at me suspiciously and coerced me to sit down as they proceeded to search the house. Moments later, one of them motioned to arrest me, to which I replied with a frown and knife in hand as I swung at them for self-defense. "What's the meaning of this, officer? You've got the wrong guy!" Then, someone hit me from behind and I dropped to the floor. So, in my semi-stupor, I could see investigators wearing gloves as they yanked out dismembered body parts from the travel bags they took from upstairs, the look of terror in their eyes. Moments later, I drew a sinister grin and said, "Hi, Dad. It looks like they finally found you." However, to this day, my mother's whereabouts are unknown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
खस देखने तो दे भाई अरे पूछना खिस तू खिस दिखा भाई दिखा
The next story was inspired by a video of a customer showcasing his Domino's pizza, except to contain an extra selection of topping than what he initially ordered. For all the Domino's pizza lovers, sorry in advance. More details at the end of the story. I know it shouldn't be a competition, but I think I have the saddest life out of anyone I know. It wasn't always this way. I was once skinny and in love, with the perfect job and a promising future. It's nobody's fault but my own that I threw all of those things away for nothing. It was the pizza that did it. No, it wasn't the pizza. It was me. The pizza was just an unhealthy coping mechanism that I latched onto when I got depressed. To be specific, the Domino's pizza. I used to work at Domino's, which gave me an almost unlimited access to all the pizza I could eat. I missed that job. Working there was probably the happiest time of my life. It's where I met the woman of my dreams, the woman who would become my girlfriend after a while, and unfortunately, the woman who would become my ex. Since then, my diet was the first thing to suffer. The stress I was under caused me to fixate on one type of food, which led me to start eating a lot more pizza. And I mean a lot. I would have a whole pizza on my lunch break. Then at the end of my shift, I would take home 2 more, one for dinner and one for breakfast the next morning. And I would never even think about eating any other kind of pizza. Not Pizza Hut, not Papa John's, no frozen garbage, not even New York style from a mom and pop shop. I fabricated reasons to hate any kind of pizza that wasn't Domino's, because Domino's was more than just pizza to me. It was an escape. My girlfriend couldn't handle being around my addiction. She was the first one to call it what it was. To her credit, it wasn't my ballooning waistline that turned her away. She wasn't shallow like that. No, she left me because I started to neglect her. It didn't take long into my spiral before the pizza started to get more attention than her.
I can't stand you anymore! You care about pizza more than you care about me! Don't act like I don't notice you turning over at night to eat leftover crust! What the hell happened to you?
I wasn't even able to respond. My mouth was always full, always chewing. Pizza was my life. She dumped me on sight, and since then, things took a turn for the worst. We still worked at the same Domino's, but she wouldn't look me in the eyes. I fell into a pit of self-loathing and lost track of my responsibilities. I started coming to work having gone days without showering, calling out way too much, and zoning out to daydream about my next meal while in the middle of a task. But the last straw was when they caught me eating a customer's order. It had been sitting on the counter for almost an hour, and I really thought they were never coming to pick it up, so I couldn't resist helping myself. But the moment I took a bite, the customer walked in, and they were not happy. They reported me to my manager, and along with everything else, they decided it was time to let me go. I wasn't able to find another job at that point because I was already 450 pounds with more gaining to go. Within a few months, I was flat broke and I was forced to move back in with my parents. They would make me feel even more guilty for mooching off of them, which sent me even further into my depression. My addiction and my weight got so bad that I was barely able to get out of bed, let alone go outside and face the shame of public perception. But instead of taking that as a sign to stop, I let myself go entirely. A year or so later, very little has changed, except for the worse. It's too hard for me to get up every time I have to use the bathroom these days, so I have a bucket that I keep at my bedside that I use to relieve myself. My mom comes in every few hours and dumps it out for me, and I still eat Domino's pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I have to order delivery every single day with what little money I make online. But there's one other reason I always order delivery. Even though most people, Domino's employees included, prefer online ordering through the main Domino's website, I always call the store I used to work at directly. I know my ex still works there, and even though I don't know her schedule, I know there's always a chance that she'll be the one picking up the phone. Hi, is Sarah there?
Speaking! Who is this?
Hi, sweetie. I missed the sound of your voice. You want a pizza me?
It's you. What the hell do you want to order?
I'll give you a pizza, my mind. 2 extra large hand-tossed pies, 1 cheese and 1 meat lovers with a 2-liter Sprite to wash it all down. Oh, and 1 order of chocolate lava cakes for dessert.
Anything else with your order?
Is there any chance I could get a special order of you? I want a pizza that action.
Hell no! Download Tinder and leave me alone or I'm calling the cops!
That's how it would usually go down when I got her on the phone. I'd make my pitiful attempt to get her back and she'd shut me down. I was still crying over the most recent rejection when my mother finally brought me my antidote. She looked at me with great sadness, then left me alone. All while eating, I couldn't stop thinking about how everyone in my life probably resents me for being a useless slob and a burden who ruined his own life. With all the tears streaming into my mouth, I could hardly taste the pizza. I barely even chewed it. I just shoved whole slices down my throat, spilling the sauce all over my face and down my flabby chin. But I didn't get to the lava cakes before I got sick. My stomach started doing flips, and I knew I was about to throw up. But I couldn't even get out of bed for that. All the food was still laying on my stomach. I didn't even roll over. I just threw up all over myself and sat there in it. I was violently ill, too. It didn't just dribble down my chin. It sprayed all over me from head to toe.
Mom! Dad! I need help!
I called for help, and both my mom and dad came rushing into my bedroom. For a moment, I thought I'd maybe gotten food poisoning, or I'd simply eaten too much too fast. But that changed when my mother screamed.
Ah! Why the hell are there worms on you?
She got hysterical in a flash, running out of the room in disgust. While she was gone, I picked through the chunks of vomit that were still left on my stomach, and there I discovered what had freaked her out. There were worms swimming inside my vomit, crawling over my body and feasting on my partially digested pizza. I had no idea how they got there, but I figured in the moment that they'd simply grown out of the filth that accumulated in the folds of fat that surrounded me. But that wasn't the case. After some discussion of which I couldn't make out the words, my mom and dad came back into the room and put the leftover pizza in front of me. I was confused as to why, until my dad peeled back the layer of cheese and revealed the same worms were already underneath the pizza I had scarfed down. I never felt more disgusted with myself in my life, but there's only one explanation. My ex-girlfriend wanted so badly to be rid of me that she laced live worms into my pizza, knowing I would eat it without thinking.
Yeah. That's perfect, Chris. Nice pizza.
This next story was inspired by a catastrophic event that went down in Oklahoma City. It was all captured by the Chick-fil-A's drive-thru surveillance cameras. Here, you can see what looks to be multiple individuals hopping through the drive-thru window and into the restaurant. Kinda strange why someone would abandon their car, right? Here's a dramatized animation that showcases what went down that day. It's been 8 years since I landed a job as a construction worker. People would come and go in this type of occupation, and that was because some tend to be dissatisfied with the $7.25 wage per hour. But while I saw countless new faces every time I worked on a project, one person stuck with me for the last 8 years, and that was none other than Andrew. Many of my co-workers avoided him because he seemed rather odd, especially with his obsession with Chick-fil-A. However, he was always punctual and diligent, supporting team members whenever they needed him. So generally, he was an awesome guy to work with. However, one time he went below the belt, causing a ruckus at the worksite, all because the boss wanted him to work overtime, which meant he had to wait an extra 2 hours to get his beloved smokehouse barbecue bacon sandwich at Chick-fil-A. To be honest, it was quite the spectacle, as he literally looked like a grown adult behaving in the manner of a kid who didn't get what they wanted. He began having a hissy fit, banging his head with a piece of plywood till his face was covered in blood. Had I not been there to intervene, he would have beaten the boss to a pulp over a sandwich. One day, while we were at the construction site, it began to rain cats and dogs, and the winds made the scaffolds jiggle. So I sought shelter, while Andrew drenched himself in the rain, working sedulously. I tried calling out to him, saying, "Hey Andrew, come over here! You'll catch a cold if you stay under the rain like that!" However, I received no response. He didn't even look in my direction, and so I did as any good friend would do. I put on my raincoat and took an umbrella. Then I approached him and crouched, shielding his upper body with the umbrella, although he was already soaked. When I tried speaking to him again, I said, "Hey, man, I have nothing against persistence and commitment, but you're older than me, alright? You can't push yourself too much, especially in this rain. You're gonna get sick as hell." Once again, he ignored me, the reflection of determination in his eyes. "Hey, are you even listening to me? Look, we were permitted to take a day off due to the weather, so we're not even supposed to be here. There was a warning on the news of severe thunderstorms." Then, moments later, while constantly pounding the nail with a hammer, he finally replied, giggling deliriously. No, I can't stop now. I need to earn more if I want to get more of that Chick-fil-A sandwich." I tried reasoning with him and said, "There's a limit to everything, Andrew. Can't you give Chick-fil-A a break just for today?" He frowned at my proposal and retorted, "You don't understand, do you? I have Chick-fil-A every single day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's my oxygen, all right? I can't live without it." "Andrew, it's just one day." "Can you live without oxygen in one day?" he asked, growing impatient. "No, I can't. But these are two different things, Andrew. There are other types of food you can eat." Infuriated, he said, "If you don't want to work, then don't. I'm not forcing you to." "That's not what I'm trying to say, Andrew. Just leave me alone or I'm calling the cops!" I couldn't get through to him no matter how much I tried. So, as soon as he completed his task, we took the car and drove off. I was in the passenger seat while he was the driver. This was Andrew's car, and we'd always taken the ride together from the house to the construction site and vice versa, because we were neighbors. As we drove to the Chick-fil-A restaurant, I noticed the appearance of thunderstorms getting worse with every second. The windshield wipers didn't do much justice, as the rain and debris were quite alarming, but I could sense that Andrew was still mad at me because of what I said, and so I opted to compromise. "Look, I'm sorry for what I said, okay? Do you mind if we head home? The weather is getting pretty bad." "I have to get my hands on that sandwich today!" "Are you blind, Andrew? Do you see the skies, dude? That doesn't look like precipitation to me. There could be a typhoon headed our way." Andrew remained silent, unfazed by the incessant moans of strong winds increasing in speed. "Andrew, turn this vehicle around now!" Still, there was no answer. So then, when I finally had enough, I said, "Andrew, what is the matter with you? This is precisely why everybody else wants to stay away from you!" In frustration, I banged on the door and added, "You know what? I give up. All of them were right about you. You're nothing but a freak. Shut up, shut up, shut up! I want Chick-fil-A! I want it! I want it! I want it! I want it! I want it!" He uttered words like a maniac, drooling all over the wheel. Then, not a moment too soon, I saw it from a distance, an ominous presence in the form of treacherous winds that descended in a graceful yet intimidating spiral, as if it were the behest of Vulcan, a god of destruction. This mass of exponential power laid waste to the fields and houses upon touching the ground. "Hey, Andrew, I know we've had our differences, but we've got to go find a bunker, fast!" "No can do. Chick-fil-A is right up ahead, and this is the only way to heaven, so whether you like it or not, I'm getting my sandwich by all means." Then, without a moment's notice, he stepped on the gas, accelerating the car's speed, prompting me to hold on tight to my seatbelt. With all my strength, I bumped into him and forcefully took the wheel. "This is for your own good, my friend! Get off the wheel! This is my car!" Andrew struggled, and despite his old age, he was strong. The vehicle zigzagged, almost toppling over. Then, when it finally came to a stop, I took off my seatbelt, about to open the passenger door. But it was already too late. Into the belly of the beast we went, and in a split second, we were up in the air, spiraling and converging with a pile of debris and cattle. With the notion of our impending doom, I mustered every ounce of courage to open the door and jump off. Luckily, I landed on a pile of crops and ran to the Chick-fil-A restaurant, the closest building to hide for cover. There were tons of other people getting in through the entrance, back door, and drive-through window, and so I had to squeeze myself in until I found a spot in the basement, bracing myself for impact. The lights flickered wildly as the tornado struck the building like massive drills and wrecking balls. Then, when it finally died down, I saw nothing but a ghost town where all establishments were ravaged, paramedics pulling out bodies from the wreckage. Later on, Andrew's car was found in the middle of the field, his head decapitated and his bones crushed. It was terrifying. Placing him in a body bag gave me chills. Since then, I would order a sandwich at Chick-fil-A to commemorate my friend and the obsession for which he died for.
Showing the moment a tornado was believed to have touched down in southern Oklahoma City. This video from a Chick-fil-A near I-40 and MacArthur. You can see the customer get out of the car and crawl through the drive-through window seeking shelter in the storm. Holy moly. We know that one has to really be scary for all involved. No one hurt is being reported in this incident, but definitely everyone very, very scared as
terrifying.
Strong winds, if not a tornado, there in the southern parts of Oklahoma City at that Chick-fil-A.
Камера снимает. Вы чё? Ладно, шли. Расскажите, что надо. Я? Снимаем, поехали. Снимаем, поехали. Что делаете? Сейчас подожди. Бабушка, ты что делаешь? Останови машину. Не буду останавливать.
This next story was inspired by this disturbing dashcam footage showcasing two men with bats attempting to rob the driver. In the background, you can see them utilize their vehicle to create a blockade so that oncoming drivers would have no choice but to encounter the bandits. The driver was eventually able to narrowly escape on the side of the road. The basic plot of the story is pretty self-explanatory, so we decided to do a mashup with the notorious creature from Jeepers Creepers. There's been several conspiracy videos online showcasing alleged footage of the phenomenon, but we'll leave it up to you to decide if it's fact or fiction. I was hours away from any major city, miles from the nearest paved road and deep into a remote rural region of my county that I'm sure most so-called locals don't even know exists. And on top of everything else, I'd gotten on the road later than I planned to, which meant darkness was setting in. I got word that my great-uncle had passed away and I knew I had to go visit the homestead for the burial. His surviving wife was quite elderly and their offspring would need taking care of everything for a few days. Unfortunately, I didn't have a passenger to share these experiences with on my drive out to their house in the plains. It was just me and my car with the endless expanses of field and pastures all around me, and of course my radio music. I knew I was close to getting there when I started navigating the muddy dirt roads. However, on this trip, I didn't feel quite the same benevolence I was used to. After enough time, the setting sun disappeared and gave way to darkness. It was right about then, at the end of that train of thought, when I started to wonder what had really been the cause of my great-uncle's death. However, I didn't get much time to ponder this. I'd just come over a slight hill when my headlights fell over a blue van parked cockeyed in the middle of the road. There was no way to go around them without trampling through somebody's property and potentially screwing up my car. At first, it seemed obvious that they had broken down, whoever they were. But as I got closer, I wasn't so sure. Still, I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, that maybe they'd pushed it out into the road to get my attention. So I slowed down to a crawl and tried to gather more information. That's when the two men who'd been driving the van appeared from inside it, holding two baseball bats and making quick strides toward my car before I even came to a complete stop. I felt my heart jump and my pulse quicken in one of those immediate fight-or-flight responses. I could tell with certainty that whatever motive these guys had didn't matter, because they were clearly desperate, and I mean dangerously desperate, with that glossy animalistic look in their eye that tells you they aren't acting like human beings right now. They even looked like they'd been attacked by wild animals, with their clothes bloody and torn. I made sure that my windows were up and my doors were locked, I gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles and grounded the brakes, trying to think of a way out as they poked and prodded my car for a way in.
Let us in! Come on, open up!
Please, please let us in! We've been out here for 2 days! We won't survive another day out here!
Open the damn door now!
I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew the last thing I wanted was to let these guys inside my car. I shook my head at them and began to slowly back away, hoping that they would somehow remain calm and wait for someone else. But they were the first people I'd seen on that entire road.
Where are you going? Let us in or we'll all die! Stop! Stop! Open the car or we will open it ourselves!
One of them quickly ran behind my car and got in my way. The panic in my brain told me to just floor it and run them down, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. After trying to maneuver around them in reverse didn't work, I saw an opening forward and put the car in drive, throttling as quickly as I dared and just barely managing to get around the van without wrecking or trapping my car. Ahead of them, I could still see the 2 men chasing after me in my rearview mirror, tripping in the darkness, homing in on the brake lights. I didn't even think about stopping for them, but I drove on cautiously into the night just to avoid any poorly timed driving mistakes. However, I kept checking my rearview mirror for them, just to see how desperate they were to get at me. I was about 100 feet away from them when I decided I'd check one last time, and that's when I saw something that made so little sense I had to stop and try to process it. There they were, the 2 of them, haggard and bloody, hobbling towards me with their bats when all of a sudden, with a single flash of something slipping by from the field to the tree line at an inhuman speed, one of them was gone. Immediately I stopped and watched the other man react to this. He screamed. Then, his wary hobble turned into a full-on sprint, with which he closed the distance between us in a matter of seconds. He collided with my car once more, striking the windows harder than ever. Before I could think to get going again, he was climbing onto the hood of my car.
Let me in, for the love of God, please! Don't let me die out here!
And right as I thought I should heed his words, I heard footsteps pounding the earth with hellish speed. And then that man's screaming was cut short. That's when I saw the man slide down the glass with his head split down the middle, spilling the torn pieces of his brain down through the rest of his severed body as it was ripped in 2. And behind the 2 pieces of the man which fell out of sight, shrouded in impossible darkness, was the creature that had done it. Now the only thing left in the road, staring at me through the glass of my windshield. Its haunting red eyes pierced my soul with ease. What it was, I can't even describe. It was as though my brain wouldn't even allow me to fully comprehend the horrific sight of it. Though from what I could tell, it was the shape of a human wearing a cowboy hat, along with a rugged trench coat. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor and plowed over the remains of that man's body and straight through whatever that horrible thing was, only to then have it jump on the hood of my car. It began banging its head on my windshield as I attempted to shake it off with a dozen sharp turns on the dirt road.
Ah! Somebody help! Get the hell out of my windshield, you asshole!
That's when the man, or thing, flew off to the side of the road as I sped off into the night. I couldn't see any signs of that thing in my rearview mirror. I wasn't too far from my relative's homestead, but those last few dozen miles were fraught with a degree of anxiety and fear I'd never felt before. When I saw my relatives, they did their best to console me, but they didn't believe what I had told them. They rather bitterly excused it as the tricks of grief upon the mind. And even when I showed them the damage that had been done to my car, and all the blood splattered on the hood, they again tried to convince me that I simply hit a large animal like a deer or a bear, and that I was going crazy over the trauma of the whole situation. After my great-uncle's burial the next day, I forced my family to go out to the stretch of road where it all had happened. But somehow, there was nothing there. No van, no bodies, no creature, just mud. I don't know how to explain all of this, but the fact that his land is stalked by some predator from the depths of hell that seems to be able to cover its tracks like this makes me highly doubt that my great-uncle died of a simple brain tumor, because his gouged out eyes tell me otherwise.
next story was inspired by a viral clip online with a Subway employee acting out of pocket for the camera in hopes of doing what most young individuals do for fame. Of course, nothing good ever comes out of this, but it was quite the feat to watch, as it shows what lengths people are willing to do to get notoriety. Here's a dramatized animation of what went down. I loved Subway because of its fresh ingredients. Moreover, it was the perfect way to have a hearty meal if I didn't have time to cook dinner at home. So on one particular night, I decided to drop by a place I called Heaven and was disturbed at the sight of a man glued to his phone, snickering while he was on the job. His eyes often twitched like he had BEB or some other neurological disorder causing involuntary muscle spasms. And although it was just a hunch, something about the way he smiled made me think he was up to no good. Every now and then he would giggle under his breath like a maniac, while his eyes remained fixated on me. And speaking of his eyes, they were round and strained with dark circles surrounding the contours, making me think he was either under the influence of some kind of substance or suffering from over-fatigue. What a creep, I thought to myself, since there was nothing funny for him to laugh about. So I struggled between sympathy and perturbation, wondering if I should go out and look for another Subway branch instead. But it was already far into the night, and the next Subway was a few miles from here, which would make it impossible for me to reach it if I had to walk on foot. I was certain this was a new guy, because I'd been here many times before and acquainted myself with all the staff, including the manager. So, despite my slight agitation, I approached the counter and attempted to break the ice to make myself feel comfortable. "Hey man, how's your day so far?" He didn't say a word. The only thing I noticed was that this guy couldn't stop giggling like a constant ringtone that ruined my auditory experience. Then, out of the blue, he asked, "You want a footlong, Daddy?" I didn't know if that was some kind of slang or not, but I didn't like the way he said it. So I frowned at him, but noticed that he was actually pleased by this. Moments later, he said, "What would you like in that footlong, Daddy? We got tomatoes, onions, spinach, peppers, and my favorite, Burger King foot lettuce. Or should I say Subway foot lettuce?" Annoyed, I replied, "I'm here for turkey and tuna, and make it quick. You hear me?" My blood boiling, I clenched my fist as I used every fiber of my being to restrain myself. I heard my voice reverberate, filling the empty corners of the restaurant. That's when I realized that I was all alone with this creep, imagining the worst-case scenario where he might be capable of slashing someone's throat when provoked. So I relaxed my shoulders and attempted to regain composure. I then apologized for raising my tone, to which he gave the most unusual reply. First, he stretched a baleful grin and laughed like a mentally incapacitated person. Then, with lightning speed, the creep organized the condiments, his eyes glued to me the entire time. Moments later, he said, "Here's your order, sir. 1 footlong at your disposal, Daddy." "Stop calling me that! I'm not your daddy!" I replied, determined to leave the restaurant. I looked at the sub he gave me, but having lost my appetite, I crumpled the cash and threw it on the counter, showing him that I wasn't okay with his bizarre attitude. Then, my heart sank as I peeked through the windows. Outside, I could already hear thunderstorms nearby, giving me some anxiety. "No, please no," I told myself, thinking of the inevitable. Then, just when I was about to exit, heavy bags of water poured down, covering the area in torrential rain and strong winds. Unfortunately, it didn't seem like it would let up anytime soon, and since I lived 15 blocks away from Subway, I couldn't risk getting myself soaked because that would mean losing my beloved sandwich. My indignation swelling, I instantly regretted leaving my car at home. The weather forecast didn't mention anything about heavy rains, so I thought it would be the perfect time to take a stroll and have some exercise. Plus, it felt good to be able to save on gasoline. However, clearly, I was wrong. Moments later, the staff member still behind the counter chortled, glancing in my direction. Then he said, "It looks like you have no other option but to stay here and eat that footlong. After all, you wouldn't want the sub to get soggy, would you now, Daddy?" At first, I thought I could book an Uber car. However, based on experience, it was immensely arduous to get a hold of one under these dreadful weather conditions. So, after a while, the creep spoke again.
Come on, don't be shy. Take a seat and enjoy your sandwich. We've got plenty of empty chairs for you to choose from.
The only thing I could cling to at the moment was patience, and so, averting my gaze, I picked a seat next to the window. Then, listening to the constant downpour outside, I decided to open up the wrapper and dig into my sub. As soon as I took my first bite, I noticed the man stifle a laugh, and in his hand he held a cell phone directed toward me. I couldn't tell if he was taking a photo or a video of me, but either way, there was nothing normal about it. I wanted to enjoy eating my sandwich since it was the only good thing I had at the moment. So I did my best to turn a blind eye and focus all my attention on my delightful sub. Then, unable to contain his excitement, the creep suddenly burst into laughter, and from that point on, I had lost it entirely. I put down the sub, and with my mouth still full, I yelled,
"Why in the hell are you laughing, you creep?"
It took a while for him to gather himself. Then, moments later, nearly choking on his saliva, he said,
"Man, you're the best! And the funny thing is you don't even know it!"
Unable to restrain my anger any further, I went straight to the counter and confronted the guy, saying,
"Are you trying to pick a fight with me, dude? Leave me the hell alone or I'll beat the crap out of you!"
Then, without a tinge of reluctance, he leaped over the counter and sauntered towards me, saying,
"Are you sure about that? I could do far worse if you don't watch your mouth, Daddy."
Threatened, I took my sub and ran out of the restaurant, hoping the creep didn't follow me. Then, as I arrived home, I sat on the couch, and while munching on my sub, I browsed some TikTok videos on my phone. I encountered a couple of weird dance videos here and there, but none of them were as frightening as this TikToker who posted videos of him stepping on the restaurant's condiments with his dirty shoes and partially drinking Gatorade from the fridge and putting it back afterwards. But the most vexing of them all was his video of aligning condiments along the sides of an unflushed toilet, wet with urine and other substances. I gasped in horror as he smiled proudly, taking a video of himself with the ingredients in the background. And what made it even worse was that it was the same guy from the subway. I couldn't help but gag, putting away my phone. Then I threw away the remaining sandwich I had brought home. A few days later, I saw the creep on the news, and it said that he had already been fired. Unfortunately, the subway he worked for closed down because of him, and I had to veer away from the restaurant, trying to forget that creep and what he could have potentially done to my sub.
Could you be a little more generous with the damn condiments? I haven't eaten all damn.
This has got to be one of the most horrific domino stories on the internet. The classic robbery gone haywire, but there was something more unsettling to this than meets the eye. Here you can see the robber forcing 2 Domino staff members into a location in which we will reveal later in the video. But we wanted to take it a step further and revolve it around a very similar case that happened at another Domino's venue. The culprit in question is shown in the photograph below. Here's a dramatized version of his heinous crime that went down that night. One day, I had to work the night shift with a coworker, where the number of orders had already diminished and most of the remaining tasks, including sanitizing all surfaces, organizing equipment, and checking the inventory. Then, moments later, a creepy-looking bald dude with tattoos all over his neck, scalp, and body stood outside the restaurant, peering through the glass windows. At first, I didn't pay much attention, thinking he must have just been contemplating whether to buy something or to head home instead. But as 15 minutes went by, my colleague and I noticed the man still standing there, glaring at us from a distance. There was just something off about this dude. He had this psychotic grin on his face and was clearly holding something behind his back. All our other customers had already left. However, we still had about 30 minutes before closing. And when you're in a tight, nerve-wracking situation like this, you just want to leave. You couldn't help but sweat copiously, wondering how time could move so slow. As much as we wanted to call the police, we had to restrain ourselves from doing so, because the guy wasn't breaking any laws, and since we were going to clock out soon anyway. My colleague, Nadine, had been traumatized from her previous job at a convenience store, where she encountered a robber during a night shift. So as she trembled, she said,
Hey, Josh, why don't you put on the closing sign and lock the door? We don't have any other customers anyway. Besides, you're the man around here. You're the one who should hold down the fort in case of any threats.
Threat? This guy wasn't committing any criminal act. Well, at least not yet. However, even if he wasn't causing us any physical harm, Nadine and I felt the same way. Something was awfully unsettling about this guy, and with one hand neatly tucked behind him, I couldn't tell what he was hiding or planning to do. I gulped as I sauntered towards the front door, but as I reached for the handle, the odd man jutted out his right foot, preventing me from closing the door. Then, in a blink of an eye, he held the door with one hand while the other remained behind his back, glowering at me as he drew a menacing smile.
Not so fast, Mr. Goody Two-Shoes,
the man said with sarcasm, still maintaining eye contact. From the reflection on the glass windows, I could see Nadine hyperventilating. I wanted to say something that would calm her down, but at that moment, my priority was to drive this man away. I wasn't the most athletic person, and I never learned martial arts or self-defense tactics when I was younger, so intimidating him was not an option. Therefore, I did the most typical thing a restaurant staff member would say, and that was, I'm sorry, sir, but we're already closed. Please come back tomorrow.
What, tomorrow? I'm such an idiot. Why would I encourage this freak to come back the following day?
The man's face was turning red, almost like he could no longer contain his anger. So, as he went in, he wrapped his arms around my neck, whispering things to my ear which only a madman would do.
I only came here for a pizza, okay? Besides, you think I was stupid? I know that Domino's still welcomes customers late at night, so you have no right to refuse my request.
I could feel his muscles stiffen with tension.
How dare you look down on me? Is that how you treat your customers here?
I felt something heavy tapping my back. Soon, I realized that it must have been an object that he was concealing behind him. It was subtle, but I knew it was a warning. Then, without a moment too soon, he unwrapped his arm around my neck, revealing the machete in his other hand. Hearing my colleague scream, I shut my eyes briefly as the machete was put into motion, and there it was. I heard it in full swing, the sound of a sharp metal object cutting through the air. Then, as I opened my eyes again, my forearm down to my hand was lying lifeless on the floor, surrounded by the blood that continued to pour. The only thing I focused on at that very moment was the searing pain, filling me with fantastic terrors I had never felt before.
Ah! 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 Ah!
Unfortunately, my colleague was still behind the counter, too scared to make a move. Then, he pointed behind me while shouting,
Go behind the counter where I can see the both of yous, and don't do anything stupid, you got that?
We did as he demanded, and then he pulled out his machete again and instructed us to move toward the cold room. Nadine was shedding rivers of tears as she tied a piece of white cloth around my wound, begging the man for mercy. Wrapping his hand around her mouth, he replied deliriously,
Shut it, woman! You saw what I did to your friend, didn't you? If any of you try to defy me, I won't hesitate to slice you into pieces! You understand?
She nodded, her body quivering in fear. Moments later, the man told us to stay in the chiller room and never come out, unless he asked us to. I had no idea what he wanted to do with us next. He could rob the restaurant for all I care, but the most important thing was that Nadine and I could make it out of here alive. So, I attempted to reason with him despite my deteriorating condition.
We don't have to do this, man. If it's money you want, I'll generously hand it to you. Just please, please let us live. The man snickered, still pointing his machete at us, and said, Oh, no. That won't do. Just when he was about to strike once more, Nadine raised her hands and said,
Okay. We'll get into the cold room. We'll do everything you say. Just don't hurt us, please.
As he shut the heavy door, Nadine sat beside me, helping me to stay warm amidst the temperature drop. A few minutes later, I felt my body becoming numb, but before I had a chance to speak, my vision became foggy until I was surrounded by darkness. When I woke up, I already found myself in a hospital bed, my right arm covered in bandages. As the police dropped by, they showed me the surveillance footage, and there I saw how the culprit warily opened the safe, gathered all the cash he could take with him, and turned on the oven, intending to burn the whole place down with me and my colleague in it. Then, while he was attending to the oven, 2 police officers quickly apprehended him. Soon, I found out that Nadine had called the cops with her cell phone and waited for them to arrive before she opened the chiller room, allowing the paramedics to take us in. If the cops arrived late, Nadine and I could have gotten frostbite, or even worse, burn alive from the oven. This story was inspired by a robbery of a Chick-fil-A restaurant caught on camera. Here, you can see 2 bandits crawling towards the back of the kitchen, where they attempt to rob a safe. Here's a dramatized animation of the occurrence. While enjoying a Chick-fil-A deluxe sandwich, I was lost in a realm of flavors exploding in every bite. However, I instantly woke up to the sound of my friend's voice saying, Psst, hey, are you thinking what I'm thinking? He leaned in closer, apparently vigilant of his surroundings, and whispered, This place is loaded, man, I'm sure of it. Why don't we? I already knew what he was about to propose, and so I butted in and said, I see where this is going, all right? I thought we talked about this and swore we would never go back to our old ways. Shh! You're not seeing the bigger picture here, Malik. We don't have to work for the next 5 months if we get our hands on this baby, he said, eyeing the door with the staff-only sign. I told you, Darius, I'm done. Didn't you get enough of going to jail? I already promised my mama that I'm starting on a clean slate, all right? I'm not doing this anymore. As I went back to finish my chicken sandwich, Darius snatched it from me, threw it on the floor, and stepped on it with his foot. It happened so fast that I couldn't turn my eyes away from the sandwich. Then, he stood up, grabbed me by the collar, and said, You'll be able to pay off all your mama's debt if you do this, Malik. Look here, this isn't for me, okay? Look at me when I'm talking to you. He slapped me hard on the face, which might have caused the attention of some of the staff and other customers in the joint. Way to go, wise guy. Do you want the whole restaurant to hear you? Huh? I replied, anxious about other people hearing Darius's devious idea. In an attempt to calm down, Darius took a seat and whispered, What I was trying to say was don't do this for me. Do this to help your loved ones and yourself, okay? Besides, if you chicken out, I know where your mama lives, Malik. What are you trying to say? All I'm saying is that I know people who do a lot of dirty stuff, and with a single word, I can get them to pay your mama a little visit, if you know what I mean. I leaned closer and whispered, Don't you dare go near my mama, you hear me? His confidence and composure intact, I couldn't help but feel that I was right at the edge of a cliff. So overwhelmed by temptation and pressure, I sighed in frustration and said, Fine, I'll do it. I need the money too, anyway. Of course you do. We both need this, man, he replied with a smirk. After paying the bill, we left the restaurant to plan our strategy at Darius's apartment. Then, when all was set, we returned to Chick-fil-A that night and made sure that all the staff had clocked out and that no one else was in sight. The streets were silent, so with our tools in the bag, we broke in by smashing one of the windows. As we entered the restaurant through the kitchen, we had to keep our heads down, crawling across the tiled floors. I can't believe I'm actually doing this. What if we get caught? Nettled by my whining, Darius replied, "There aren't any guards at this time, so rest assured that it's only the two of us here." From the kitchen, we arrived at the central area intended for customers, surrounded by tables and chairs. But unlike the brightly lit ambiance that once resided here, the entire place was shrouded in darkness, our path guided by several dim lights, casting shadows on the corners of the room. Moments later, I heard the sound of metal clanging, resonating from the kitchen. "Darius! Psst! Do you hear that? I think we better go back and rethink our strategy." "Stop being so paranoid, will ya? It must have been some rodent or something. I need you to focus, Malik." Right in front of us were glass windows aligned with an entryway, also made of glass, meaning that if someone decided to take a peek, Darius and I would be sitting ducks. Upon nearing the counter, I noticed a dark figure with the contours of a man standing on a sidewalk just across the Chick-fil-A restaurant, and he appeared to be looking in our direction. "Darius," I whispered. "Fall back. I think we need to get the hell out of here." "What is it with you this time?" I pointed to the man across the street, but all that Darius said was, "Don't mind him. He's just one of those homeless people wandering the streets at night." "Jeez. What makes you so sure?" "One more word from you, Malik, and I'll beat you to a pulp, even if that means going back to jail." Despite my reluctance, I decided to take Darius's word for it and forced myself to turn a blind eye, even though my heart was pounding like crazy. Then, when we finally reached the counter, Darius told me, "All right, now this is where I need you the most, Malik. Don't you dare screw this up." He gave me instructions to be on the lookout for anyone peeking. So, while Darius was busy drilling the safe, I remained lying on my stomach like a spotter in the military force with a knife in my hand. Every now and then, cars would pass by, so I made sure to keep my head down the entire time to avoid grabbing anyone's attention. Then, amidst the drilling noise, I could hear the sound of lights flickering and electrical lines sparking, making me all the more anxious, afraid that Darius and I might accidentally start a fire. Moments later, I noticed another car passing by, but unlike the others, this one appeared to be slowing down right in front of the restaurant. "Darius, stop drilling, I mean it. A man just stopped his car in front of the restaurant. It could be a cop." My heart throbbed faster as I saw a man exit the vehicle with a flashlight and a crowbar in his hands, motioning towards the Chick-fil-A. Darius was on standby, holding his driller while remaining silent. Then, moments later, the guy approached the glass door, in which I quickly crawled backwards to stay out of sight. But before he could take a peek, his phone rang, and he went back to his car and drove off. After he left, Darius went back to drilling until he opened the safe. Then we made a run for it as soon as we filled the bag with cash. The following day, we were both on the news. Luckily, since we wore masks and gloves, the investigators couldn't identify who we were. However, with the recollection of that frightful night, I would forever be traumatized by this experience. I still don't know if that man with the crowbar was another fellow bandit or just some off-duty employee. Nonetheless, Darius would continue to threaten me to do his dirty work till this day, and there is no way for me to escape. You don't understand, do you? I have Chick-fil-A every single...
Where are you at?
I have to go change out of my clothes, okay?
Okay.
Just hang out the bar for a second?
It's a little late to be prowling around these parts.
The story was inspired by a creep who has been quite the meme online for some time. From the video, you can clearly see his bizarre resemblance to the fictional character Mario. The man enters a house through a sliding door and communicates with someone who appears to be old enough to be the creep's kid. What you don't see is the eerie intentions behind this interaction. This is an animation inspired by the infamous Super Mario lookalike. I used to love all things Nintendo. My whole entire room was decorated with action figures, posters, stacks of game cartridges, and even many of my clothes were Nintendo themed, from the bed sheets to the socks on my feet. You could say I latched onto it as a substitute in the lack of any real personality traits. And admittedly, that's what I tell people when I don't feel like being completely honest about my past. I still find myself preferring to live in the falsehood where things in my past never happened, but the constant lying itself weighs more heavily on me than anything. So I think it's just time to come clean. I was in my early teens when all this happened. Even then, I was a huge Nintendo nerd. The problem for me at the time, however, was the price of the DS. At $150 whole, it was something my mother was reluctant to get for me. But I didn't want to wait for Christmas, even if it was only a month away at the time. Even though I didn't have enough money on my own to buy it with, I still went to the GameStop every day on my walk home from school. I knew I wouldn't be able to buy it, but I could still look at the display versions in the store, and maybe even score some demo gameplay if I was able to get a spot behind the controls. Unfortunately, because of Nintendo's popularity, I was almost never able to play the DS before I had to continue walking on home. There was just always somebody on it already, and I was always too scared to ask them to get off so I could play a bit. There was one guy who I often saw there who seemed a little more approachable. He seemed to be about as big a fan of Nintendo as I was, at least initially, because he dressed like he was Mario himself, and he was pretty good at the Super Mario demo that was available on the store's DS. It started on a Monday, when I was having a pretty bad beginning to my school week. I had begun to recognize the guy who always looked like Mario as he'd play the demo several days out of the week. Eventually I decided since I couldn't play it myself, I'd just watch these other people play. More often than not, I was looking over the shoulder of the Mario lookalike, and it didn't take long for him to notice the shadow. "Hey there, sport. You been waiting to play? My mom says I'm not supposed to talk to strangers." "Oh, you don't have to worry about me. But you're probably wondering why I look like Mario, right? Well, actually, Mario looks like me." "Yeah, right." "No, I'm serious. I'm the guy that based Mario off of, believe it or not. I'm just coming in to make sure they did a good job representing me." "Wait a minute. If you're the one Mario is based on, then that means you're Mario?" Yes, it's a me, Mario. "Are you actually a plumber?" "I sure am, kid. You got any plumbing questions you'd like to ask me to make sure I'm really the original?" I don't know anything about plumbing, but I know a lot about Mario." "Alright, ask me anything." I sat there and grilled the guy about all of Mario's backstory, and he really knew his stuff. He actually told me some information that wasn't even in the manual to the Game Boy version. He actually got me to believe that Nintendo had based the character of Mario on his likeness and personality. After talking for a little while, I told him that I had to go home before my mom got worried. But he told me he'd be back at the same time tomorrow if I wanted to hang again. I said that I would, but I was a little worried. I'd never really talked to an adult like that before. He seemed like he understood what it was like to be a kid more than a teacher usually did. And that was nice, I guess. But to be honest, what really made me go back and talk to him again was the DS. I knew he had money because he was an adult. I just needed to figure out a way to get him to buy the DS for me. It seemed like a far-fetched possibility, but I was willing to give it a shot. Somehow, though, it was almost like that guy was reading my mind. The first thing out of his mouth the next time I saw him was, "Hey kid, you're looking to score one of those new DS's, right?" Yeah. How'd you know?" "I can see it in your eyes, little guy. You won't stop looking at the DS demo." "Alright, what's the matter to you?" "Well, I was just thinking, why don't we have a friendly competition?" "Oh yeah? Like what?" "Well, how about we both play through the Super Mario demo and whoever gets the higher score wins. The loser has to buy the winner the new DS. Sound good?" I nodded and agreed to the challenge, knowing I didn't have the money to buy the DS if I lost. But I was pretty confident in my skills as a gamer. I played Super Mario on the GBA every day, and all I had to do was figure out how to play it on the DS, and I should have been able to win. He let me go first, starting at 1-1. Then, my heart sank as I realized how different the controls of the DS felt. This was the first time I'd ever touched one, and I had no idea what I was doing. I lost all of my lives before I even got to the first world. When the man was ready to play, I was hoping he would take pity on me, but he didn't. He absolutely crushed my score, getting 3 times as far as I did before finally stopping. Well, looks like I won. Sorry, buddy. What's wrong? Oh, you probably can't afford to pay for the DS, can you? Well, that's okay. There's another way you can make it up to me. How would you like to play another Mario game that I created? If you play it with me, I'll buy the DS for you. What do you say, kid? Okay, I'll play. That's wonderful. We'll have to go to my house to play, if that's okay. I can give you a ride home after so your mom won't be mad. Okay. Foolishly, I got in the man's car and he started driving towards his house. As we drove off into the main roads, I could visibly see him huffing and puffing, as if something was concerning him. But what made things even more odd was how he began to stick his tongue out like a panting dog, while his face became drenched from the amount of sweat dripping from his head. I was convinced that Mario was experiencing some kind of episode. Loud police sirens began echoing the streets, which clearly made him more anxious. I nervously asked him, Mario, are you okay? Why do you look so nervous?
Shut up, kid! Bowser's after us! But don't worry, my checkpoint is located at my house!
It was at that point I could tell something was horribly wrong. I finally came to my senses and realized that this man was nothing but an imposter gone mad. He literally went through traffic like we were in Mario Kart. I began to yell,
Leave me alone or I'm calling the cops!
That's when the deranged man dropped me off at a random intersection and drove off. I eventually got home by public transit and never told my parents what happened until many years later. I continued to walk past the store in which we met every day, but I never saw him there again. I guess he got as far away as he could, but he couldn't run from himself. A few years later, when this was still a secret only I knew about, I saw his face on the TV. The program to catch a predator had caught him committing the same evils he tried to do with me, trying to traumatize another little gullible soul for the rest of their lives for his own demented and short-lived pleasure. Obviously, because of all this, by the time my mother really did get me the DS for Christmas, I couldn't stand anything to do with Nintendo, as it triggered all the memories of what happened between me and that man.
It's a little late to be prowling around these parts, huh?
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Why don't you have a seat right over here for me?
All right, thanks.
Right there on the stool. What are you up to tonight?
Not a whole lot.
What are you doing here?
A friend asked me to come over.
A friend? And who's that friend?
I'm not sure.
Now, investigators are looking into reports that fireworks were going off before the flames broke out.
A fire that took off and moved fast at about 3:30 Sunday morning. More than 100 firefighters came from across the city.
The next story was inspired by a fatal incident in northeast Portland that caused 2 entire complex buildings to burn down. You can imagine the 4th of July blaze being a horrific sight for those that resided there. The next animation was inspired by the tragic occurrence. During my freshman year of college, I lived in the student dorms on campus. I had pretty good luck with my boarding buddy my first year, but it wasn't until he packed up and left to go home for the summer that things took an unfortunate turn. I would have gone home for the summer as well, but I spent most of my first year in college going out and partying and staying up late. And while I managed to keep my grades in check during the fall semester, I failed 3 out of 4 of my classes during the spring semester. This meant I had to retake all those classes during the summer, which for many reasons was not ideal in the slightest. But it wasn't just missing out on going home to party with my old friends from high school that made me regret my decisions. It was who moved in after my other roommate. You see, during the summer, most people go home, and college towns like the one I lived in turn into ghost towns until things pick back up again. My dorm hall in particular was almost completely abandoned. So, you can imagine my confusion when I was notified by automatic email that I would be getting a new roommate. Part of me was glad I wouldn't be spending the summer alone, but very quickly I realized I'd rather be alone. Right away I began to wish I was. April was barely over when I first arrived at my door. The first thing I noticed about him was his height. He had to duck his head just to get in through the door. But despite being unreasonably tall for his age, he was stick thin. His proportions were almost inhuman, like he was Slender Man in human form. And when he walked into the room, I also noticed that instead of a backpack or a suitcase, he carried all of his belongings in a huge duffel bag, which, by the way, his spine curved to the side of his body on which he was carrying it, looked to be extremely heavy. On top of everything else, the semblance of conversation he was able to hold was just as awkward. Hey, nice to meet you. I'm Parker. I guess you're my roommate for the summer?
No, I'm just transferring. I didn't fit in at my last school, but hopefully things will be different here. Do you celebrate the 4th of July?
Yeah, man. I bet there'll be some good parties around then.
Oh, that's just what I was hoping for. You're the perfect candidate for my celebration plans. It's gonna be a blast!
Cool, man. I dig the energy. So, what's in the bag?
Oh, you know, just books and stuff.
Alright, well, make yourself at home, and I got some beers in the fridge. At the time, the 4th of July was still a couple months away. I never encountered anyone so preemptively excited about that particular holiday. But even though I found that to be strange, his fixation on the 4th was not the weirdest thing about him at all. I never once saw him get up to use the bathroom or take a shower. I never saw him leave the room to go to class. And I can't remember a conversation with him that didn't end up on the subject of the 4th of July. It was like he was lying in wait, totally dormant until that date finally arrived, which seemed to be all he cared about. The only thing that kept me from thinking this guy was a robot or something was that he did seem to read a lot and study for his classes. Of course, he didn't do either of those things like a normal human being would either, because no matter what he was doing, he would never stop staring at me. When I tried to study on my bed, he would climb onto the foot of it and sit there without asking, crossing his legs and sticking his face into a book. Dude, I'm not trying to be rude, but I need my space. This is my study zone. I need to focus.
Oh, don't worry about me. I won't bother you. Just pretend I'm not even here.
I tried to be cool about it, but it was hard to handle his constant gaze. He'd sit across from me with a tiny little book and hold it really far away from his face with his long spindly arms. So I knew he could see me around the edges of the book. It all gave me the creeps, but I did my best to ignore him. I didn't want to confront him because I was worried he would snap. Eventually, I couldn't handle it anymore. I started spending entire days away from the dorm, studying in the library and going on walks through the campus. I told my roommate that I needed to focus on studying really hard because I wouldn't be able to retake those classes again. And while that was true, I really just wanted to get away from him. Worst of all, he never slept. He would just lie awake at night like a chronic insomniac. Every night in bed, I could feel his eyes on me from across the room, wide and unblinking.
Just 10 more days until the 4th of July, roomie. Just 10 more days.
I played possum, pretending I was asleep most of the time. He was so excited about the holiday that he interrupted my sleep one night with a thunderous countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy 4th of July!
Dude, what the hell is wrong with you? It's 3 in the morning!
I'm just rehearsing!
I began to lose endless nights of sleep. Not because I was sharing in his restless anticipation, but from a terrible sense of dread of what his plans were for that day. On the night of July 3rd, my nerves were just about shot. I was getting ready to go to bed for a night of fitful sleep when I noticed my roommate was actually in the bathroom taking a shower. I'd never once seen or heard him take a shower, so I figured I'd get more insight on what his preparations for the next day were. Even though it was risky, I knew I'd never get another chance, so I took the opportunity to look through his belongings. First, I opened up some of the books that he had out, and that's when I felt sick to my stomach. Every single notebook was empty, and every supposed reading assignment completely unannotated. Then, I unzipped his duffel bag, and the only thing in it, and I mean the only thing, was a collection of highly illegal fireworks. Cherry bombs, mortars, flares, every kind of recreational explosive you could possibly think of, and not one change of clothes or a toothbrush. I put everything back into its place and crept back into my bed, fully aware at that point that the person who I'd been living with was no student. He was a complete psycho with other plans altogether. I knew I had to get the hell out of there, but I pretended to be asleep while trying to formulate an escape plan. Unfortunately, all the sleep I lost in the weeks prior caught up to me, so I passed out with the intentions of leaving first thing the next morning. I woke up later to the sound of explosions perforating my eardrums. I scrambled in confusion, half asleep and dazed by the concussive blast and disoriented by the screeching wails of the fire alarm. In the middle of the room, I saw my roommate holding a fistful of sparklers in one hand and Roman candles in the other, with an array of mortars and rockets lined up at his feet, set up with a network of fuses which were already lit and sending 20-foot fireballs into the confined space of the dorm room. There was a wicked smile on his face, and all over the other deafening sounds, I could still hear him laughing like never before.
Happy 4th of July, roomie!
Leave me alone, I'm calling the cops!
The room was full of sparks and fire. I jumped out of bed and ran through the chaos, rockets hitting me on the back of the head and flying across my face the entire way. But I made it out through the door. From there, I ran outside to safety. I had to leave all my belongings behind. And in the end, it all became scorched in the fire that he started. The same fire that reduced my room to ashes had ended up killing him. Thankfully, the fire only spread to a few other unoccupied rooms. The investigator said that he managed to disable the sprinklers in our room. That was probably what he was doing in the bathroom. They said they found him still holding onto his fireworks, with a permanent smile melted onto his face.
This is one of the most bizarre stories I've personally come across when it comes to fast food stories. The video appears to showcase an ordinary customer purchasing a meal at Subway, but what happens next will have you shocked from your head to my toes. Get it? To my toes? Tomatoes? Never mind. On with the story. I used to be a regular customer at Subway, taking a mouthful of cold cuts with juicy tomatoes and various veggies. But now that I started working at one of my favorite restaurants of all time, it was a lot more than I expected. I was given the task of filling in the condiments, but it wasn't easy. I had poor coordination and I worked slower than my more experienced colleagues. So to compensate for my lack of ability, I decided that coming to work an hour earlier would give me ample time to prepare meats and vegetables before opening. I looked outside the window and noticed just how dark and gloomy it was. It gave me the notion that rain was about to pour down at any moment. On top of that, I was all alone. So, when a man started banging on the glass door, it was horrifying. He wore tattered clothes, his skin possibly blackened by the smoke of passing vehicles along the road. So yes, he appeared to be a homeless man. From the looks of his red-rimmed eyes and varicose veins, this deranged man resembled a zombie trying to get in. Hey! 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 Open up! I need to use the restroom to take a piss! I hesitated, not knowing what he would do to me if I opened the door. Furthermore, the restaurant was still closed, so I wasn't supposed to let anyone in except the owner or staff members. Hence, I tried to reason with him and said,
I'm sorry, sir. Please come back later when we're open. We only have about 50 minutes left, so just wait a while.
50 minutes? The man appeared to be getting more aggressive now. I don't have 50 minutes, okay? If you don't open this door right now, I'll have no choice but to reveal my footlong and take a piss on the entrance. Do you want that? He challenged. Agitated, I replied,
Oh, you wouldn't dare. I'll report you to the police.
I immediately got on the phone when he started to unbutton his pants. I'm not kidding, I'll really do it, he said with conviction. So I put down the phone and asked him to stop.
Okay, I believe you. Sheesh, man. Don't do it. I'm letting you in, but briefly, okay?
Cross my heart and swear to die, he said as he giggled in triumph. I was still reluctant to open the door. However, I didn't want to be reprimanded by the shop's owner or manager for his loathsome act. So, as soon as I unlocked the door, he strode at lightning speed and went straight to the restroom as he said he would. While he was busy answering the call of nature, I stood at my post behind the counter, waiting for him to finish his business and leave. However, upon vacating the restroom, he approached the counter and demanded that I offer him a soda to help him hydrate. So I asked for his payment, to which he said, I wasn't making an order. Then, when demanding a drink wasn't enough, he added, and oh, throw in a sub while you're at it. Since he didn't have any cash on him, I thought it would be appropriate to give him water instead, which he frowned upon at first, but eventually accepted because he was genuinely thirsty. However, ordering a sub was a whole different matter, and it was something I couldn't allow him to have. Nettled by my lack of acquiescence, he said,
I need something to fill this belly! Are you giving me that or not? Despite my anxiety growing, I stood my ground and replied,
No? In fact, I would appreciate it if you were grateful for the water I gave you. And besides, I told you that I'd let you in briefly.
So, before I had any chance to dial on my phone, he went over the counter in a flash, grabbed my phone and made me collapse to the ground, hitting my head so hard that he almost knocked me out cold. Then, as I struggled to get on my feet, I saw him take all the money from the cash register and make a run for it. I used the restaurant's landline phone to contact my boss and the police. When they arrived, they instantly reviewed the surveillance footage and got my statement. Luckily, I wasn't reprimanded. In fact, my boss sighed in relief, seeing that I escaped this ordeal with only a few bruises. So, the rest of the day went by as usual. Even when I was offered to take a day off, I politely refused and told my boss that I could still handle the job. We had so many customers coming in and out that I instantly forgot about that creep from earlier this morning. In the evening, the number of people had finally diminished, but unfortunately over-fatigue had taken over my mind and body, where I almost slept on the job. Then, moments later, a customer came in and approached the counter. I yawned as I took his order, and I didn't even bother looking at him because I was so lethargic. The man proceeded to order a footlong. While I was busy preparing his sub, he kept yapping about how stingy I was with the ingredients. The guy stood at the counter telling me,
Could you be a little more generous with the damn condiments? I haven't eaten all damn day. I just took a huge dump in your washroom, which makes me even more hungrier. And this is what you give me? Pack the sub more!
With my back turned against the customer, I replied as I heard him stomp his feet, indicating his growing impatience.
Don't worry, sir. Just stay calm. I'm doing the best I can.
And then, without forewarning, he jumped over the counter with a knife in his hand. He pointed it at me menacingly, and with teeth clenched, he said,
Shh! Don't you dare make a move! And don't you even think of screaming for help if you don't want me to slice you into thin strips of salami!
My body froze in fear, and all my drowsiness evaporated into thin air. I stood far from the man collecting his bounty from the cash register, putting them in a bag. He was even murmuring something incomprehensible as he gathered the money with a sinister smile. Then, when he had his fill, he leaped over the counter and rushed out the door. I took the opportunity to run to the manager's office and call the police, and I made sure to lock myself in until the authorities arrived. Upon reviewing the surveillance footage together, we saw the man return to the counter after I had locked myself in the office, where he came back to get his sub before leaving the store for good. That's when I realized that I had met this man before, and that he was the exact same person who robbed me this morning. To this day, the police couldn't get their hands on him. I just hope I don't see him again, or his footlong.
The next story was inspired by a viral clip of a man at a gym who experiences something quote-unquote paranormal. Here you can see a medicine ball mysteriously rolling towards him. But what happens next is something quite disturbing when you see it unfold. Here's a dramatized version of the alleged occurrence. I've never been one to believe in the supernatural. However, I've learned that the supernatural doesn't care if you believe in them or not. If they've got a problem with you, you've got a problem. There's always been stories about the old gym I used to frequent. Years and years ago, the same building was originally a dance studio helmed by the most cruel and unforgiving man in all of Colombian dance history. As a dance instructor, he was an undeniable genius. The performers he produced were beyond flawless, but those world-class results came at a hefty price. As a man, as a human being, the old instructor was an abusive, vindictive, vile monster that never should have been trusted around little girls. My mother relayed many of the stories to me, always with a 1,000-yard stare. Apparently, the old instructor would starve his students if they were too heavy, and would lash at them if they couldn't get something right. Worse still, if they talked back to him, the story said he would chain them up in a dark room and leave them there for hours, sometimes even days. But the worst thing of all is what he would do to the girls he liked, but I'm sure you can get the picture on that. The old instructor's reign of terror with those poor dancers came to an end when one of them dropped dead in the middle of a session. Legend has it that the girl who died was the most unfortunate of them all. Not only did she bear all of his abuses, but she also knew all of his darkest secrets. Some say it wasn't a coincidence that she died, that the old instructor poisoned her because he did something to her so despicable that he couldn't chance anyone finding out about it. Coincidence or not, his dance practice was shut down for good shortly after that. The building he had used laid vacant for quite a few years before anybody would use it for anything. It eventually became the gym it is today, but not before that old devil of a man faced his retribution. Slowly, over the years following his forced retirement, he went crazy. He became more and more tormented by the sins of his past until one evening, he hung himself from the rafters of his own former studio. Ever since the building became a gym and I started working out there, my mom warned me not to go. People say that it's haunted, that it's been cursed by the tragedy of what took place there. But of course I didn't listen. I went there often, and not only were there other people who felt the same as me, but none of us had ever seen or heard anything strange in the building. It's hard to get spooked when there's other people around.
You know, I think this gym might be haunted. Either I'm getting stronger or something supernatural is helping me lift these weights.
Really now? Dude, do you need a spotter? You know you shouldn't lift without a spotter.
What do you mean without a spotter? I got a spotter looking over my shoulder everywhere I go in here.
Oh yeah? Like who?
Dude, just spot me. You're asking too many questions.
There used to be 5 or 6 acquaintances of mine who would frequent the gym. I'd run into at least one of them every single time I went, and often there would be a few of us there at one time. But I suddenly stopped seeing all of them. It wasn't like they had all slowly gotten demotivated or decided to try another gym. They just vanished. One day they were there, and the next they were nowhere to be seen. The last day I was there, I was the only one. There might have been the odd stranger passing through here and there, but for the most part I was alone. I didn't think this would mean anything except that I wouldn't have anyone to talk to. So I set my stuff down in my usual place and started stretching. I was standing before the mirror wall where the dumbbells were stored. To my knowledge, that's the same mirror that was in the dance studio. And I couldn't help but think about all the terrible things that must have happened in that mirror. I stared into my reflection absent-mindedly, and that's when I heard a loud bang behind me. A chill ran down my spine. I had to stop stretching for a moment and refocus myself. I looked around and found myself still alone, but nothing was moving like I thought it was. I stepped away from the mirror and returned to my bag, meaning to check my phone for a text that would take my mind off the situation. But somehow, it wasn't in the place I'd left it. I started digging through all the pockets in my bag looking for it when I heard it ding behind me. I turned around and it was perched on the edge of the rack that all the medicine balls were stored on. How the hell did you get over there? I quickly snatched it before a gust of wind could knock it over and went back to my bag to make sure it wouldn't be misplaced this time. That's when I heard something behind me again. A thud that I felt in my feet. When I looked back to the rack, a medicine ball had fallen off and started rolling along the floor towards me.
Who's there? You'll never leave. Never!
I snapped myself out of my trance and grabbed all my things. I was stunned. I thought I had gone crazy. The mirror, the noises, the phone, and now this? It was all too much for me to ignore. I snapped myself out of my trance and grabbed all my things, heading for the exit as quickly as I could. I just wanted to get out of there before any other ghost-related thing could happen, but I was too late. I was halfway to the door when I felt something push me. I slipped across the slick floor and fell on my back. I was still sliding with my momentum when something grabbed a hold of my leg and started dragging me all over the place.
Help! Help! Somebody help me!
I screamed for help, but there was nobody around. I could feel my body literally levitate off the ground as I did everything in my power to yank my leg free. I dropped my stuff on the floor when I fell and left without it. I scrambled to my feet and ran the hell out of there. Every time I tell this story, the public usually gives me the cold shoulder because it simply sounds too good to be true. But unfortunately for them, the gym camera footage says otherwise.
On July 4th, 2010, in Oakland, California, a 19-year-old male suffered one of the most brutal injuries when it comes to the iconic Independence holiday. Fireworks can be a dangerous thing, but this takes the disclaimer to a whole new level. The next animation was inspired by the incident. Here's a dramatized version of the event. I was more than ready to move out to join the Marines, and for as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to serve my country. But when my buddies found out that I had planned to become part of an elite fighting force, they invited me to a party on the 4th of July, to which I said in a snap, "Of course, count me in. Just remember not to go empty-handed, okay?" One of my friends urged, his lips curling into a baleful grin. "I think I know what you mean," I reciprocated delightfully. So, when they asked me about fireworks, I recommended something I had always wanted to try, but never got the chance to use when I was much younger. "What about we go for the M1000? I said proudly. "And what the hell is that?" my friend Jake asked. "I heard it's better than most fireworks. Besides, you wanted a show, right? It's the 4th of July. Might as well use a good one." I winked back at him. "All right, bring 2 of them then." Brian pushed even further. Yes, it was pernicious. However, before entering the censorious world of Marines, I thought it would be best to have some fun. "All right, guys, let's do this," I said with conviction. When I entered the convenience store to buy some drinks, I noticed some of the lame fireworks on display near the glass windows and approached them thinking, what the hell? Only 7 or 10-year-olds would buy these. Of course, I already knew beforehand that I wouldn't be able to find any good fireworks at a corner shop. So I put the fireworks back on the stand and immediately left with the beverages I bought, walking down the street until I noticed this creepy old dude on the other side of the road. He wore a blue bomber jacket and a cap, his smile sinister and his eyes fixated on me, almost hypnotic. So I admit that I was freaked out, especially when he urged me to come closer like one of those people on the news who were next to a vehicle and were instantly abducted. I gulped, feeling a bit anxious, but it felt wrong to be presumptuous, so I remained vigilant as I approached the car, thinking that he was probably those individuals that held garage sales within their vehicles, based on what I was seeing. "So, what's up?" I asked casually, relaxing my shoulders, hoping he wouldn't notice how edgy I was deep inside.
"You're perfect! You're just the guy I was looking for, and I'm just the guy you need."
His eyes grew more prominent with the look of anticipation in them. Puzzled, I wondered what he was referring to, because he wasn't making any sense. So, as he pointed to the trunk of his car, all the gold and diamonds shimmered before my very eyes. Well, just to clarify, there weren't actual gold and diamonds, but to me, it was a treasure trove, filled with M80s, M150s, M1000s, and M2000s. So, at that moment, all my trepidation had vanished, and I was ecstatic.
"Well, what do you think, big guy?"
he asked, his eyes glimmering with euphoria. "How did you know I was looking for fireworks?" I inquired, raising an eyebrow.
"It's almost the 4th of July!"
he said teasingly. Then, moments later, his smile grew more protuberant as he laughed in a rumbustious manner, saying,
"I'm just messing with you. I saw you checking out those lame fireworks by the window at the corner store."
Relieved that he wasn't a kidnapper, I continued to pursue the items and opted to buy 2 M1000s as my friends and I initially agreed upon. How much for the M1000? I asked, hoping it would be worth the price.
Well, originally I'd sell it for 20, but if you want to buy 2 of them, I'd be happy to give you each for just 10.
I contemplated for a moment and thought it would be a lot riskier to order online, so I took the offer and closed the deal. Dude, you sure these are good? Like, are they properly manufactured?
Yes, of course.
And all that zeal was quickly replaced by chagrin.
Are you questioning my credibility as a salesman? I've been selling these babies for 13 years now!
I had no intention of entering into a conflict, so I simply apologized and thought of buying one of the larger ones in addition to the M1000s. Then I sent photos of them to my friends, and they all responded with excitement. The following day, we enjoyed the party, and it was a blast with the cool DJ, bouncy houses, alcohol, and the myriad of people who came to the backyard. However, the most exhilarating part was lying in a box, just waiting to explode at the right moment. While the others were busy drinking and dancing to the beat, I began setting up the fireworks as my friends and acquaintances cheered for me. The large one was positioned at the center, while the 2 smaller M1000s were taped, one on each side. It was time to light it up, so using a lighter, it was set aflame. All eyes were on me now, as we waited for the moment it would shoot up into the air and burst in this spectacular amalgamation of colors. However, a few minutes later, nothing happened, and the collective ecstasy of everyone gathered to see the fireworks display evaporated into thin air, filling me with immense pressure. So, to save face, I blew out the fire and approached the fireworks against the advice of my friends not to.
I paid for this, all right? And I'll do whatever it takes to make it work,
I said distressfully, to which all the other people cheered for me again. As I came closer to inspect the fireworks, I made sure to create a distance to avoid unnecessary accidents, noticing that everything seemed to be in place and nothing was particularly wrong with them. So I lit it up once more, but was unaware that my arm was close to the wick. It happened so fast that I didn't even have the time to react. As soon as they exploded, a powerful force pushed me back, and all I could hear was the incessant high-pitched tone ringing in my ears, slowly diminishing as time passed. When I rose from the ground, my friends stared and screamed, and that's when I saw it, one of my hands completely obliterated. My friend Jake yelled,
"I told you not to get too close!"
My heart racing, I replied,
"Help! Please! Somebody call the cops!"
Everyone else panicked as the fireworks went all over the place, causing injuries on the legs, arms, and face. Then, moments later, they all died down and we were brought to the nearest hospital, where I had to ponder on my actions and regret for the rest of my life that I had lost my hand, and that now I would forever lose my marine dreams. The next gym story is quite relatable for any gym rats out there. You're bound to encounter individuals like these, as they usually like to show off and hog machines as if they own the establishment. Here's a dramatized animation based on these kinds of scenarios, but of course, gone wrong. I've always been skinny. As a kid, my relatives would always tell me that I would bulk up when I hit puberty, but of course, the opposite happened, and I just leaned out even more. By the time I got into college, I was sick of always being known for being skin and bones. I took matters into my own hands and started working out at my community gym 5 days a week. Of course, the contrast between me and all those super jacked meathead dudes loaded up on pre-workout at the gym always made me worry about what they were thinking, if they're judging me or not. Whenever I'm working out at my gym, I'm never too far from the most beautiful, irresistible, goddess-tier woman I've seen anywhere in the world. The sight of their tight bodies keeps me motivated and into the mindset of the grind, so I can get to a point with my body where I can feel confident enough to actually go up and talk to them one day. This is all a fantasy, of course, as I sure have a long way to go until I can look like the dudes those girls are interested in. For the longest time, the one on top has been a man who calls himself Hugo. I'm pretty sure that's not his real name because this isn't the year 1845, and I think he just likes the sound of it because it's so close to huge. As corny as it is, the name is earned. He really is the biggest, most muscular man who comes to the gym, a legit bodybuilder. He's always flexing for the hottest girls to get their attention, and he often leaves with one of them. All the other men suck up to him, but I know they're terrified of bringing their girlfriends around him, because if he ever made a move, there would be nothing they could do to stop him from stealing their girl. The fact of the matter is nobody has the power to resent him for anything he does. He basically owns the whole gym. He spends several hours there every single day, and he always takes forever with the machines. You'd have a death wish if you ever told him to stop hogging them, though. If anyone smaller and weaker than him is using a machine he wants to get on, he'll do whatever he sees fit to kick that person off and take it for himself.
Time's up, Twig. It's Hugo's turn.
But I just got on 5 minutes ago.
Did I stutter? Get off unless you want to be my punching bag!
Okay, I'm sorry.
Everything about you is sorry.
He made it a point to not even use the leg press after kicking me off it. He just sat down in it and started flexing for some girls that were nearby.
You know, I can deadlift 6 stacks of 45s on either side of the barbell, and I can bench press 5 plates, but only for a rep or 2.
Oh, we know, Hugo. We watch you do it every day. What is that, like 10 of him?
I bet he wishes he could be half as strong as me.
I was on the other side of the room by the weight racks, which meant I could see them behind me in the mirror, staring at me and gawking at my proportions. They saw me looking back and started to whisper, so I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I knew it was probably about the size dumbbell I was using. I had just recently started lifting, and because I was so thin and weak, I had to start on literally the smallest weight in the gym. I should have known better than to stick around after talking to Hugo.
Hey, Stickman! Yeah, I'm talking to you. Get over here and bring me the biggest dumbbell they got in here.
My heart started pounding immediately. His shouting had gotten everyone's attention, and they were all looking at me. I walked all the way to the other far side of the rack and found the largest weight. It was a full 100 pounds. I could already feel the blood rushing to my face. I had no idea if I could even lift the thing, let alone carry it across the room, but I had to try anyway. It felt like it was nailed down. I heaved and heaved, but it would barely budge. The snickering surrounded me, and my vision closed in. Finally, I managed to pick it up long enough to get it off the rack, but I dropped it immediately. I didn't even have the grip strength. Everybody was laughing. My stomach was crawling up my throat. All I could think to do was roll the weight across the floor. When I finally got to Hugo, I could see the prideful belittlement in his eyes.
Are you serious? This is the heaviest thing in here? Pathetic. No, there's gotta be something better. I got it. How much do you weigh?
120?
120? Well, I guess it'll have to do. Come here.
I couldn't even react before Hugo grabbed me by the shirt and pants and lifted me up into the air. And then he started to curl me like a barbell with ease, flinging me around like I was actually a stick. I struggled, trying to break free, but it was no use. He had a vice grip. He curled me probably more than 20 times before he finally dropped me on the ground. I've never been more humiliated in my entire life, and I had an entire childhood full of humiliation. I felt the embarrassment bubbling, the simultaneous surge of impotent rage and pathetic tears. I didn't dare try to square up with Hugo. I knew I couldn't handle the steroid-fueled aggression. So I just scrambled up to my feet and ran outside before anyone could see me crying. The next time I went, several days later, I did everything I could to be unseen. Hugo was there, of course, but when I arrived, he was preoccupied with tormenting some other poor schmuck. I started with some cardio on the treadmill, but I didn't get half a mile in before I heard him calling out to me. "Hey yo, barbell buddy, how about you come and spot me, huh? You like the sound of that?" He was acting like he was affording me some great privilege to be in his presence, but his voice was dripping with a sarcasm that made it clear he had some other intention behind the offer. I got off the treadmill and walked calmly over to the bench he was hogging. By the looks of it, everyone that had been around him a minute ago had gone off to do their own thing, and it seemed like Hugo was about to pull some sort of stunt to get the attention back. He had the barbell loaded up already, with 5 plates on each side, plus an added 20 pounds on both ends. "Watch me hit this PR." He laid flat and readied himself. I put my hands lightly on the bar for support and waited. He lifted the bar off the rack and slowly lowered it towards his chest. I could already tell that it wasn't going well. The whole bar was shaking, rattling the plates as he struggled. He bottomed out, then lifted it up about 3 inches. Right about there, he stalled. His eyes suddenly went bloodshot, the veins in his neck bulging more than I've seen on a person. Then, right as the fountain of blood began to spray from his nose, the bar dropped onto his chest. I was far too weak to give him enough help to lift it off, so the whole thing slowly slid down until it was pressing on his neck. Hugo started choking and spitting blood, flailing his legs around in a futile struggle that was a lot quieter than you'd expect. I kept trying to pull it up, but it was no use. I started to call out for help. "Help! Help!" But nobody in the gym wanted to come to the aid of a scrawny little stick like me. They had no idea that I was calling for help on the behalf of Hugo. It was almost a full 3 minutes later before anyone strong enough came by and lifted the bar off, but by then, it was too late. Hugo was motionless, and his bowels and bladder had been relieved. The bar had crushed his windpipe with ease, and now he was just a big, dead slab. Ever since then, the gym has been much more peaceful. The death was ruled an accident, and nobody even thought to suspect me for anything. Little do they know, I had just enough strength to keep Hugo from pushing the bar over the side to save himself. I have no idea why he wanted me to spot him on the PR attempt, but it sure was a great opportunity to pay him back for the way he disgraced me. The next story might be one of the most outrageous stories we've ever covered. It involves 2 Domino's staff members going at it with one another, but the backstory behind it is, well, see for yourself. The next animation portrays a dramatized version of the alleged occurrence. Here's what it looked like. I've never been the kind of person to let others push them around. I learned a long time ago that being submissive to people is just no way to live. I say that, and I don't know what I did to earn this karma, but I seem to attract control freak personalities in my life. The most recent example is my old manager from Domino's. I don't want him to have any more reason to come after me than he already does, so I'll just use the name Josh to refer to him. Every employee agreed that he was controlling and needlessly particular about everything. Because he was a grade A cheapskate, he had all these unnecessary, unofficial rules to increase profit margins and cleanliness. Like when we made a large pepperoni pizza, we were to use no more and no less than 10 pieces of pepperoni to cover the whole pizza. If that doesn't sound like enough pepperoni to you, that's because it's not enough. We were constantly getting complaints from customers about this practice, but no matter how nasty the customers were, Josh refused to change the policy. He frequently got into screaming matches with customers that ended up getting banned.
Excuse me? Who's the manager here?
That would be me, ma'am. What's the problem?
There's only one pepperoni on each slice. Are you kidding me? What's the deal here? Why skimp me on the only topping I requested?
We didn't skimp you. You got the proper amount.
Oh, bite me. This is ridiculous.
Well, if you don't like it, go somewhere else.
I will go somewhere else. You just lost a customer.
You mean we just lost a tramp? Don't ever come back or I'll call the cops.
Jerk, deadbeat.
But it wasn't just the customers he would scream at if he heard something he didn't like. If you were one of his employees and you got on his bad side, you were guaranteed to get yelled at for something every single shift, no matter what. Somehow, though, my coworkers didn't believe me about this. It usually only takes 2 people to run the store during most hours, so most people didn't get to see firsthand the way Josh treated me. According to them, although he was particular and nitpicky, he was respectful to his employees as long as they followed the rules, and usually took out his frustrations on the customers who questioned his business practices. Unfortunately, I'm a stubborn person. I don't like to just sit down and do whatever people tell me to do if I genuinely believe that it's wrong. And I know the 10 pepperoni thing might sound ridiculous, but I always thought that if I paid full price for a large pepperoni pizza and got a small's worth of topping, I'd be pretty miffed. And it's worse how he always acted like a child when he didn't get his way. I couldn't let it stand. That's how I got in the habit of finding little ways to mess with him. The first time I challenged him, it went about the way you'd expect. It was just me and him working, and there was an order for a large pepperoni. I put 11 pieces on it instead of 10, then popped it in the oven. Of course, because Josh couldn't let me take care of a pizza on my own from start to finish, he went and grabbed the pie out of the oven before I could, and almost immediately he flipped out. I was at the register taking someone's order when I heard a loud banging from the back, and I knew that Josh was pounding his fists on the table. Then came the screaming, as he stormed up and chewed me out right in front of a customer.
Are you stupid? Can you not count? I should fire you for this!
Dude, it's 1 slice of pepperoni. Chill out.
No! Don't tell me what to do! I'm the boss! I say 10 and it'll be 10! Do you hear me? Do you?
Yeah, alright, fine. I hear you. 10 slices of pepperoni next time.
You know what? Go home and come back tomorrow! You're wasting my time and pepperoni, dimwit!
Are you freaking serious?
And don't forget to clock out!
I went home that day more pissed off than I'd ever been over anything in my entire life. He wasn't just being unfair, he was being vindictive and threatening my livelihood. I seethed over it the entire night, and before long I knew that one way or another, this was going to come to an end the very next day. I came into work the next afternoon on my best behavior, in a totally fake sort of way. I worked as hard as I always did. The only thing I changed was that I momentarily swallowed my pride and sucked up to him so his childish need for total control over everything could be satisfied, just so I would be able to tear it down all over again. I waited until there was another order for a large pepperoni. Then, I took action. I did the same minor, insignificant deviation from Josh's requirement. Then, I popped it in the oven like everything was totally normal. Josh was already suspicious of me. I knew he would have seen the ticket for the large pep, so he'd be checking the oven before I knew it. I retreated to the walk-in cooler and started frantically sorting the dough trays. I felt my blood pressure already rising out of regret for the deed I just committed. I was pissed off at that in and of itself, the fact that I was so fraught with anxiety over the matter of a single slice of pepperoni. But it got worse when Josh started screaming again.
Ah, seriously? Again? Why?
I heard him stomping through the kitchen, looking for me. I grabbed a loaded tray and tried to leave the cooler with it in my hands, but Josh blocked me at the doorway.
You did it on purpose, didn't you?
Oh my god. Why do you care?
Right then, I could see his face turn hot red as I held a pizza tray up as a shield, in which he hit it out of my hands.
What's wrong with you?
Shut up! Shut the hell up!
Josh swung his fist again, but instead of aiming it at me, he punched the wall right between us so hard that it froze me to my core. He started screaming, drooling, and crying all at once, all while pummeling the wall with the same fist. I don't know how many times he hit the wall, but I was deathly afraid the entire time that he would suddenly switch this unhinged, raging violence onto me. But at the same time that I was petrified with fear, I was also really embarrassed and just sad at the sight of a grown man acting like this. Eventually, the skin on his knuckles started to break. I could tell he was stunned with himself and out of breath for the moment. So I picked up the dough tray and walked away.
You dropped a dough ball! You're wasting more expensive ingredients, tramp!
Rotten hell! Just because you can't satisfy your wife doesn't mean you have to take it out on us!
After I let him have a piece of my mind, plus a lot of other unsavory things I'd been saving up to cut him down, I walked out and left him hanging for the rest of the day. He tried to fire me again, but I was already in the process of reporting him to corporate. However, they wouldn't do more than suspend him for a day until I was able to convince an old worker of mine, who shall not be named, to sneak into the office and steal the security footage of the whole ordeal. After that got sent to HR, it was an open and shut case. He was immediately terminated the day of. But after sharing my story with the internet, now that the camera footage is online, the nightmares at Domino's has resurfaced my psyche.
I'll give you a pizza, my mind. 2 extra large hand-tossed pies, 1 cheese and 1 meat lovers with a 2-liter...
The Super Mario world has always been an iconic trend since the 80s, and hasn't gone out of style since, especially as a costume in the modern day. This story was inspired by a Super Mario-themed house party gone wrong, which unfortunately ends in a missing persons case. The person who sent this story has disclosed the alleged last photograph of the victim taken by the accused. Here's an animation inspired by the event. This was probably the most anticipated season of all time, Halloween. My friends and I were gamers, so when I heard that Super Mario was the theme, an idea instantly sparked. I saw Luigi and immediately felt a connection. At the party, I drank and danced with a couple of friends looking like the female version of Luigi. At first, we were having so much fun, until one of the drunken ladies in a Princess Peach costume pushed me and said,
"What's that you're wearing? That's just a freaking jumper you put on top of a cheap long-sleeve shirt." Oh yeah? You think this is cheap, huh? Well, who are you supposed to be? A Walmart-looking version of Princess Peach?
I replied, which my friends supported with a tumultuous laugh. Agitated, she said,
"Do you know who you're talking to? Take that back right now!"
With patronizing superiority, I turned my back, implying that interacting with her was a waste of time. After that, it all happened so quickly. She pulled my hair, strangling me on the floor. Some of the guys intervened, and the crazy lady was eventually restrained. However, I was so embarrassed that I decided to sit down and get myself drunk while my friends went back to enjoy the rest of the party. Then, moments later, some old geezer in a Waluigi costume sat next to me, his eyes piercing and his smile ingratiating. He handed me an open can of beer and said, "Here, have some of this, Miss Beautiful. It'll cheer you up." Gazing at the can suspiciously, I politely declined.
No thanks.
However, dissatisfied by my lack of interest, he forcefully held my hand and replied, "Hey, that's not how you respond to a kind gesture. Come on, it wouldn't hurt to take a sip." Enraged, I said,
"No thanks, mister. Which part of that did you not understand? Leave me alone."
I instantly went outside to get some fresh air. But looking to my left, I saw two guys hanging by the side door, and they were in the Yoshi and Wario costumes. The one in a Yoshi costume scanned me from head to toe, licking his mouth maliciously like a deranged person. Moments later, the guy wearing a Wario costume approached me, forcefully pushing me to a corner and asking for my number. Disgusted, I naturally rejected the man who further asserted, saying,
You know, I'm really into ladies who are hard to get, so why don't you drop the act and give me a chance, huh?
He gripped my arm, glaring at me with penetrating eyes indicative of his adamant behavior.
Let go of me, you freak!
I hollered, hoping the other guests would take notice.
A freak? How dare you?
Without a tinge of reluctance, he shoved me to the ground, leaving me weak at my bottom. Raising my hand in submission, I said,
Stop it! Somebody help!
Unfortunately, most of the other partygoers were either drunk or under the influence of something, that they couldn't hear my plea.
No one's coming for you, dear, so don't waste your energy on nothing.
As he drew near, I revealed my pepper spray and immediately used it on him.
What the hell? Come back here, you coward!
He replied, as he toppled on the cement, feeling agitated while his Yoshi friend assisted him. I immediately ran a couple of blocks down to some random street. Then I started calling for an Uber ride while trying to catch my breath. As I waited for the car in my drunken state, I noticed a bright flash flicker behind me. I turned around and noticed a red vehicle parked by the sidewalk with its windows down. It was an older gentleman dressed as Mario, with the signature red cap and mustache. He waved at me and said,
Hey, Luigi, perfect timing. I've been looking for you. It's me,
Mario. Although my mind was a bit hazy, I smiled at his affable personality and confirmed if he was the Uber driver I was waiting for, to which he said yes. So, in my semi-stupor, I immediately went into the back seat and sighed in weariness.
Rough day?
The driver asked emphatically.
Yeah, I'm just a bit exhausted, that's all.
I replied politely.
I understand. You just sit back and relax, Luigi,
he said in a comforting tone.
Thanks. By the way, happy Halloween,
I told him, as I looked out the window watching the oddly deserted streets with no sign of trick-or-treating.
Yeah, happy Halloween indeed. By the way, we make a perfect team, don't we?
He said zealously, pointing to his Mario costume.
What a coincidence, right? I mean, it has to be more than that.
Right? It's like fate, and you're my partner,
I said, massaging my temples to relieve the migraine.
Partners! Wow, I love the sound of that. Do you really think it's fate?
At this point, the driver appeared to be a little bit more ecstatic than he was supposed to be. So, gradually, I began to feel uneasy. Finally, I offered him a curt nod and abruptly fell silent, browsing through my social media account on my phone. From my peripheral vision, I could see the driver constantly oogling me through the rearview mirror.
You know, I like Luigi and all, but why didn't you dress up as Princess Peach instead? You would have been so beautiful in a dress. Oh, don't get me wrong, I still think you're gorgeous, and I'm super happy that you called me your partner.
I listened to him speak while constantly browsing through my phone, thinking that this driver was unusually talkative, and he was beginning to creep me out.
You know, you could have sat next to me here in the front. I feel so lonely seeing you on your phone at the back, ignoring me.
The moment my eyes left my phone, I peered out the window and found in horror that we were surrounded by trees, no longer following the path on the map. Anxious, I asked,
Where are we? Aren't you supposed to follow the map on the app?
And finally, my girl speaks to me. You know what? I've never really had any luck with girls. They always gave me the cold shoulder, and I'm just sick of it.
Okay, that's enough. Pull over. I'm canceling this ride.
I've been watching you from afar, Luigi. I've always wanted to talk to you, but I was so scared. However, now that you're here, I don't feel so afraid anymore,
he said,
accelerating the car's speed.
Hey, slow down! Okay, I'll listen to you. Just stop the car, please!
I cried out. My semi-stupor entirely vanished. Why would I stop the car if I want to spend more time with you? I thought you said we were partners. I bellowed as I helplessly barged on the door. When he finally stopped the car, he pulled out a knife, and that's when all hell broke loose.
Mario, where are you? It's me.
The following story was inspired by a disturbing dashcam video of a white figure masquerading from a distance in front of a man's vehicle. Here, you can clearly see some deranged woman holding a cane while approaching closer to the car in an unsettling manner. Here's an animation inspired by the occurrence. It was my cousin's 18th birthday, so my relatives invited me to visit their humble abode on the city outskirts, to which I immediately said yes. While I was driving along the highway, my car's GPS abruptly malfunctioned, which gave me a migraine since it was the only way I could arrive at my relative's domicile without getting lost. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, my phone's battery died, and I didn't have a charger with me at the time. What an idiot, I told myself, regretting that I failed to double-check my stuff before leaving the apartment. When I got to the gas station, it was already dusk. I bought a portable charger and then asked the cashier for directions. Fortunately, the man was kind enough to offer me a shortcut. I was so grateful that I even gave him a tip. However, before I left, the cashier called my attention and said, "Hey mister, why don't you spend a night at the motel a few blocks away? It's getting pretty dark out there." Although I appreciated his empathy, I explained that I had a party to attend, so there was no turning back. "Oh, yeah, I see. Totally understandable," he said, scratching his head warily. His gestures were on edge, almost as though he wanted to warn me about something. So, curiously, I asked, "What's the matter?" The guy averted his gaze for a brief moment and said, "Oh, it's nothing. You have a safe trip now." Afterward, he turned his back and ignored me all the way through, which seemed rather odd. Now that I was all set, I was on the road again, listening to some rock music on the radio. But unfortunately, it was incredibly dark this time without a moon to give me some natural light. Coming from concrete surfaces to a long, narrow stretch of earthen roads, I knew I was no longer in the city. And with only the car's headlights to rely on, it was hard to tell whether I was still on the right track or not. Then, moments later, the music on the radio was replaced by a high-pitched ringing sound before abruptly turning into static noise. Following this incident, my headlights lost their power, startling me quite a bit. The car, enveloped in darkness, surrounded by tall grass fields on both sides, made me feel uneasy. Am I lost or something? Upon checking my cell phone's GPS and internet access, for some bizarre reason, they weren't working at all. Ah, great! So much for the charger, I exclaimed furiously. Eventually, I decided to turn off the radio, but as soon as I did, I heard something gradually approaching me. I couldn't tell who or what it was because I didn't stay long enough to find out. So, I hit on the gas immediately and put the vehicle on reverse. I shook off the thought, and finally, I met some locals who knew my relatives and were accommodating enough to point me to their house. When I arrived at my destination, I sighed in relief as I joined the celebration. I had the opportunity to enjoy myself, forgetting the amount of stress I had to endure moments earlier. However, avoiding alcoholic beverages was necessary to veer away from car accidents on my way home. At one point, I had to use the faucet to wash my hands and my tired face, but since there were tons of guests, I couldn't use the restroom or the main kitchen sink. Luckily, they had a dirty kitchen at the back of their house, facing the riverbank, which my aunt said I could use.
There were a few dim light posts in the area, and it was ultimately silent compared to what was going on inside the domicile. But as I washed my face, I caught the scent of something rather unpleasant, and it smelled like rotten flesh. So I instantly wiped my face with a towel, thinking I should head back inside as soon as possible. And then, in a split second, I heard a horrifying induced gurgle sound, similar to the one from the movie The Grudge. The voice sounded so close to my ear that I jerked and glanced behind me. Next to a tree, there was a woman in a white garment, and her body appeared to be shuddering as she stood there in the dark, her eyes eerily fixated on me. Frightened, I went back inside and sat in a corner until the party was over. Then, when most of the guests had gone home, I approached some of my relatives gathered in the living room. Anxious, I hollered, "Did any of you invite a strange lady wearing all white? She's really old and carries a cane." One of my cousins looked at me confused and replied, "Well, none of the people here today brought a cane, that's for sure. But I saw a woman in the back. She was having spasms and she reeked of a corpse." Moments later, one of my uncles came forward and offered to accompany me to the back of the house holding a flashlight. However, upon checking the area, there was darkness and nothing more. When I went back inside, some of my relatives expressed sincerity, while others were nettled by my lack of consideration towards the kids, scaring them off. So I apologized for my behavior and left. On my way home, I was surrounded by silence once more. It was a tranquil evening until I saw something slowly crossing the road. It materialized a few meters away from the car, and there was nothing to suggest that it was a feral animal because of the way it stood. Albeit crooked, the white figure in front of me had long black hair and a cane. Soon, I realized that it was the same lady I saw back at the party. This time, however, she wasn't just standing there. With one leg crippled, she sauntered towards me, her eyes deadpanned and her jaws unhinging most unnaturally as she opened her mouth to reveal small, sharp teeth. I constantly wailed, "Get back! Stay away from me! Get the hell away from my car!" But no matter how much I tried to warn her and intimidate her with the car's honking, she still persisted in approaching me despite her frail body. Suddenly, the car wouldn't start, and the headlights flickered. "Come on! What's the matter with you? Help! Help!" I desperately turned the keys as I struggled to hit on the gas. The woman was near the hood when the car's engine finally worked, allowing me to leave immediately. I motioned backward and took a complete alternate path, never looking back. When I arrived home, I was so exhausted that I instantly went to bed. The following day, I thought it had all just been my imagination, until I checked my dash camera and saw the same terrifying woman with her mouth wide open. I didn't know who she was, but I hoped to never see her again.
The video portrayed here surfaced the internet for a few years now. It showcases a truck driving through a one-way road and encountering a blockade ahead of him. There appears to be a few men strolling by the side of that road, casually flagging the trucker to stop. But what makes the story more chilling was what lied ahead. The next animation portrays a dramatized version of the alleged event. I've seen a lot on the road as a trucker. Seen all sorts of breakdowns, roadkills, and wrecks. Not to mention more than my fair share of sketchy roadside stops. But there's one story that tops them all in my years of experience. It's so crazy that my boss didn't even believe it until he saw the dashcam footage. But it's something I can never really forget. I've lost a lot of sleep over the nightmares of remembering it. and for a while there, it almost cost me my ability to do my job. If anyone is willing to listen, there's lessons in this story that anybody on the road should learn from, whether you're a biker, a four-wheeler, or even if you drive an 18-wheeler like me. For one, if you're driving cross-country, make sure to take extra precautions. Don't be like me and think you're going to be fine driving through no man's land just because you got years of experience or a piece in your passenger seat. Of course, with current trucking regulations, you can't drive for more than 8 hours per day. So the trade-off that many truckers make when they want to make better time is to drive through the night, specifically from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., when the roads are the emptiest and you won't be held up by traffic. Personally, at the time, I wasn't thinking about the risks associated with night driving. I just wanted to make it to my destination as soon as possible. The whole night started off strange. For the first few hours, the road was eerily empty. Normally, at any time of night or day, there are other truckers on the road with you, but not this night. I felt like I was totally alone, the only person on the road. The only thing that kept me company was the moon, which was dressing itself as an omen of bad things to come, in the shape of a crescent and the color of blood, staring me down for its entire slow crawl up the horizon. But things really turned for the worse when I hit my first pit stop for the night. I'd been driving for a few hours at that point, and I was in need of a place to stop, relieve myself, and refuel the truck. Given that, your choices for gas stations are slim. You pretty much have to take what you can get. I kept my eyes peeled as I parked and stepped out to refuel. Again, I was the only person in sight. The fluorescent lights added to the sense of unease that was slowly building in my gut, complete with a droning buzz. After paying at the pump, I thought about trying to go into the little convenience store that went along with the gas station. But at first glance, I noticed it was definitely closed down for the night. I opted to use the little toilet in the back of my cab, which I try not to overuse for maintenance purposes. I think I'd gone several hours without seeing a single soul, until I stepped out again to unhook the pump. Where is everybody? I was looking all around the flat, dark expanse for signs of life when I saw a haggard-looking man in the distance stumbling towards me. When he realized I'd seen him, he started sprinting haphazardly like some cracked-out Tom Brady about to body-check me. He looked so much like a zombie that it sent a shiver down my spine. The man makes a full stop inches away from a collision and says,
"Sir, I need to talk to you. I need to tell you something."
I had no intentions of chatting with him. I got a bad feeling about the whole place and got the heck out of there. I climbed into the cab while the man kept shouting,
"Where the hell are you going? Please, you need to listen to me!"
I pulled out immediately and headed for the long on-ramp back onto the interstate at a quick yet cautious rate of speed. I was glad to get out of that stop, but I couldn't help but look back through my mirrors. What I saw behind me made my heart jump. That same man was chasing after me, running and flailing his arms at me like he was trying to get me to stop. But I wasn't in any state of mind to stop for anyone who might give me trouble. So I pressed on, accelerating a little. Right before he was out of sight, I took one last glance in the mirror. And that's when I noticed a flash of something so quick that I wasn't even sure if I'd really seen it or if my eyes had played tricks on me. The face of that man as he passed under a light was covered in the dark red of blood. I didn't know if it was a self-inflicted wound or if he just hit his head on something after our encounter. Either way, my nerves were hopped up and wired, but I told myself to just keep going forward with my eyes on the road. Unfortunately, I didn't get far.
What the hell was that?
I was halfway up the on-ramp when I ran over what seemed to be either roadkill or a very large object. I pressed on as there was no way in hell I was down to catch a potential hit-and-run charge. I then approached a bridge ahead in the distant lights of some port city when I saw a blockage in the road. Laying there was a full tree branch across the entire pavement. This made no sense. There had been no major storms in the past few days, and there weren't even any trees near the interstate at all. But I didn't have time to think about that, as I started to apply the brakes to come to a stop, believing that all I had to do was get out and move the branch. An unholy sight rushed in on me. From their hiding spots behind the barriers on both sides of the ramp came a mob of dozens, maybe even a full 100 people, all converging on my truck, which was almost completely stopped by them. Many of them were waving me down, signaling me to stop. But they weren't the good Samaritans they were trying to appear to be, and I already knew this. They started hurling rocks and branches at my truck. My heart started pounding, sweat pouring down my face. I did my best to keep cool and not panic.
Stop the truck and get the hell out now! Leave me alone, you cartel junkies, or I'm calling the cops!
First, I tried going back, throwing the truck into reverse and backing away. I was going to try to get all the way back to the gas station where there might be some safety in numbers with the other truckers. But again, I didn't get far. Members of the mob that were trying to get to me were surrounding me on all sides, getting behind me to block my exit. They knew I wouldn't have the level of heartlessness required to run them over. But I can't lie, I certainly thought about it. I then put the rig into drive and floored it, I plowed straight through the blockade, cringing as I heard the wood snapping itself into the components of my truck. Thankfully, I made it through the debris and was able to get up to speed on the interstate. To make sure I'd really lost them, I jerked the rig around to shake off anyone who might be hanging on the back. I was able to get another 50 miles before one of my tires blew out from being punctured with wood splinters. I was well and far enough away from that mess, though. The rest of the story isn't as interesting. Just me stranded on the side of a barren road waiting for a Mack tow truck. Of course, I contacted the authorities and everything, but all of that is out of my control at this point. The only thing that's left for me is to move on from the whole thing. To this day, I still have trouble sleeping over it. I always get caught up thinking what would have happened if they just waited another minute for me to get out of the truck. If I would have ended up like that other guy I saw, or even worse. One thing is for sure, though. I'm glad my truck was equipped with a dash cam. I wasn't even thinking about the camera the whole night, but it turned on automatically and captured the whole thing, which not only saved me from getting fired from my job, but also landed me some compensation pay, and provided a cautionary tale for other road hogs to learn from, that you can never know what's around that bend.